Hello and welcome back to Lorehammer. I'm Primarch, hosting today, but we also got joining me. We got Tech Priest Gerald. Hey, buddy,
Hello.
how are you doing? My squinty-eyed, light-eyed friend.
I just had myself a sacred oil bath and I am feeling excellent.
Perfect. And we also got Nick. Hey, buddy.
Hello, all you grimdark lovers out there. Pleasure as always.
Yeah. Today we have a fucking killer episode. It's called Founding a Legion, and we're kind of picking up from the last episode of the Primarch Project. So it's gonna be fun. But before we get into that, we'll just go through housekeeping real quick. Spam you with some extra ads and shit. You guys see Secret Level?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yes.
I asked the other guys, and they didn't quite get around to watching it yet. So
Sad day.
sad
Yeah,
day for them.
Sad day.
Yeah, I loved it, man. It was so cool.
I thought it was beautiful, like the animation and everything, and it was top notch. You could tell it was a labor of love.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, the same guy who did Astartes did all those graphics, but I can't confirm that. That was just what somebody in our Discord was saying.
He was credited in the end credits, so.
Cool. Okay.
And to anyone who's seen the Astartes animation, I'm not going to make any major spoilers or anything, but you can see a lot of similar story beats.
Sure. Yeah. I loved it. So definitely go check out Amazon Prime and get Secret Level.
Mm-hmm.
So, what'd you think of it?
Yeah, the thing that I was just like, when is this set? And then you see Titus with the laurels on his helmet. I'm like, this must be set after Space Marine 2. So this is what he's up to now. This is what Calgar has him doing, going on suicide missions, I guess.
He just cannot please Leandros.
Yeah, fucking
Cannot
Leandros.
please Leandros.
Spoilers.
It's been one day. If you haven't seen it yet, what are you doing with your time? Come on.
Exactly. What are you doing? Are you a heretic?
Yeah, also it's Christmas time. Getting closer to it. At least it's Christmas season, so Merry Christmas, boys.
Yeah, Merry Sanguinal to you.
Merry happy birth of Sanguinala.
Yeah, we have a cool little bonus episode planned eventually here where we're going to be sharing some 40k Sanguila short stories, hymns. Maybe there'll be a little Red Gobbo appearance. Yeah, but if you want to donate to Lorehammer, if you're feeling charitable, is it charity to give Lorehammer money? Maybe, but either way, you can give Lorehammer a one-time gift. We have a special link on Patreon, www.patreon.com/Lorehammer/gift. You can go throw Lorehammer a couple extra bucks this holiday season, or in the link in the description below, there's also a one-time donation thing there too. So you can click any of those and throw Lorehammer a couple extra bucks.
And along with those couple of bucks, you get such perks as a ad-free version of the show for just $2.50. So barely the price of a small McDonald's fry, if you were into such things. And for $5, you can get a ad-free versions of the live stream, and you can see our beautiful faces. So...
Yeah, and technically that live stream is early access. You get the podcast a week earlier than everybody else and on Patreon too. So that's kind of nice. We never really talk about that, but it is a thing.
Exactly. And so I must ask this every single episode, with all those perks for such a abominably low amount, what are you doing? Are you a heretic? Why haven't you joined the Imperial Tithe yet?
I do my part.
Yeah.
Well, join the Patreon. You also get to access the live chat room that we do on the show as well. We are always reading off comments, and we'll throw your name out there as we're going to. And then at the end of the episode, we also do a call-in guest too. A great way to get on the show. Come in, we ask you a bunch of questions, and we get to chat with you. I personally love hearing from members of the community. So, please join us. Please. Makes my day.
Makes his day, makes his whole week. Callus just joined up. Hey, welcome. Hey, what's up, guys? Okay, I think we're ready to get into the founding of a legion. But I would give us some little context. I gave some context on how this is going to work the next handful of episodes. Apparently 72 episodes we're looking down the barrel of. Primarchs and legions and Astartes. It's such a big topic, and there's so many little lines that connect here and connect there, and there's 100 fucking books out there. let me just tell you the game plan of how I plan on approaching this massive topic of Primarchs, Horus Heresy, Great Crusade stuff. So every Legion and Primarch will get 4 episodes. We will start off by doing a Primarch episode, and we'll cover their origins and the Great Crusade, and then we'll jump to the Legion, and we'll cover, their kind of origins in their Great Crusade, and then we're going to jump back to the Primarch, and we're going to cover the Horus Heresy and beyond. Like, what does he do in the Great Scouring, and does he reappear in 40k? And then finally, we'll do a 4th episode in a row, and we're going to talk about the chapter in 40k. So we'll jump forward 10,000 years and kind of give what the current rendition of them is. And I feel like when we do this approach, we're going to actually be able to cover a lot of different little pieces that all kind of get combined ultimately without having to do 10-hour episodes. When I was writing the very first Lionel Johnson episode notes, I was up to like 60 pages before I'm like, holy fuck, I think I need to break this down into at least two episodes. Like, it was wild.
We should probably also make mention that don't worry, all you Xenos and Chaos fanboys, we're going to space these episodes out quite a bit so we don't go crazy just talk about Space Marines and Primarchs. So
yeah, that's a great point. Like, it's going to be 4 episodes of like that kind of routine, and then we will do 3 Xenos episodes, your kind of standard Lorehammer themed episodes, and then we'll go jump to a Trader episode, then do 4 of them, then back to Xenos, and kind of repeat that. And yeah, like, it's going to be 72 episodes at least, plus those Xenos episodes. So we're looking at a whole full year of Lorehammer coming up. But I'm super excited. I know lots of people like Mark talking about Space Marines. All we're gonna get is yelling, but this is Firstborn, so I'm happy, man. It's gonna be good.
Moral of the story is, if you are a big fan of the Astartes and the Primarchs, this is an early Christmas gift to you guys.
Yeah. The other little bit of context, like I shared on the Primarch Project episode, and I'll share here, is when writing these episode notes, like I said, there's so much context. So I kind of ended up taking the approach of, I'm an old school gamer. I've been in the hobby for many years. So back in the day, we used to have conversations about what these Primarchs got up to. This was before the Horus Heresy books were actually released. It was all just speculation. You'd stay up all night long talking to your friends about, like, what do you think this guy got up to, and why do you think he actually fell? And we'd argue power levels and all that. And eventually, we figured out all these nitty gritty details. I kind of want to resort back to Primarchs being mythological, a time of legend. We don't fully know all the details, although we kind of do. I'm going to just be picking the important stuff out. So when going through this, if you're like, hey, you missed this little bit of information, it's probably likely that I just intentionally did not include it, just because I didn't think it was relevant to the overall story. I kind of just asked myself, like, what would people in 40k know? Would they know about this happening, or would that have just passed into myth and legend and forgotten to the 10,000 years? And that was kind of the way I've approached it. So just be lenient. Like, if you didn't hear your favorite bit about your chapter or Legion, maybe it will get another episode. For example, during the Primarch Project, we didn't really touch Arda at all. We talked about it for 1 second, but maybe she deserves her own episode at some point. She helped do the Primarch Project, but it just felt like, ultimately no one in 40k would know her name. They would know that the Emperor did the Primarch Project. They wouldn't have this whole list of everyone who was involved in the names and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the approach of how I'm doing this with you boys.
All right.
Sounds like a winning game plan to me.
Yeah. So before we get into like the next episode, which will be the first Primarch episode, Lionel Johnson, we're going to talk about how founding a legion happens. We're going to talk about the first founding. Eventually we'll get into the second founding a little bit. But yeah, let's just talk about kind of we have the Primarchs, and they were made, and then they were scattered across the galaxy. But before they were able to take the little genetic samples to make these super soldiers. So yeah, let's dive in. The first founding. The first founding of Space Marine legions, also called the Legionis Astartes, occurred in CA 700 M30, after the end of the Age of Strife and during the unification wars that founded the Imperium of Man on Terra. 20 Space Marine legions were created from the gene seed of the 20 superhuman Primarchs, engineered by the Emperor of Mankind from his own genetic code in his gene laboratories beneath the Imperial Palace on Terra in the Himalayan mountains. In spite of the fact that the Primarchs were separated from the Emperor of Mankind through the mysterious actions of the ruinous powers of chaos and scattered through the warp across the galaxy, he managed to keep a complete sample of each Primarch's DNA. The Emperor used these templates to create the first Space Marines by genetically enhancing his own Terran-born soldiers with the gene seed derived from each Primarch's genome. The Space Marine legions born of this process were used to complete the unification wars on Terra and then to initiate the Great Crusade to unite all of mankind's scattered colonies across the galaxy. With each Primarch the Emperor rediscovered during the course of the Great Crusade, he gave them command of the Space Marine Legion created from their own genetic material to back them up. Each Primarch then set upon the Legion's headquarters on his homeworld, from which they also started recruiting new Space Marines into the Legion. Two other legions, the 2nd and the 11th, Legion and their Primarchs were created by the Emperor, but nothing is known what became of these legions and their Primarchs, and all data permeating to them was deliberately deleted from the Imperial records before the start of the Horus Heresy.
And if I do recall correctly, I think that is the only time in Imperial history that such a purge was completely done.
Yeah, and like even some of the Primarchs, when they were trying to remember their brother Primarchs, like who were they? They tried going back into their memory and they found that they had like a psychic mind block on this, and they couldn't recall it. They're like, I remember my battle brother. Wait, what was his name? Wait, what did he look like? I thought it's like trying to remember a dream after you woke up. The more you think about it, the more you're like, I don't remember any of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know when the Emperor goes and meets up with the Primarchs can almost sense that he's the father. Does that also bode the same with other Primarchs? If one Primarch meets the other, can they kind of sense that they're siblings?
Yeah, probably. I would imagine, like, they all have this same psychic kind of creation, this kind of like warp lineage almost. While there was like science that went into their creation too, there was some warp fuckery as well. And the other thing, like with Primarchs, is they have this like aura around them where they're just awe-inspiring figures. The regular human looks up at them and they're speechless. So I'd imagine they've never met another creature like that, so they kind of get that familiarity of that as well.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, I'll be straight up honest with you. My knowledge on the Primarchs and Space Marines is very limited, so this is going to be as much of a learning episode for me as well. I'm more of a Xenos fanboy, so I'm sure I'll have a million questions for the two of you as we're going.
Yes, yes, Inquisitor. This gentleman right here. This gentleman. Yep.
Yeah, he's a filthy Xenos lover.
Do have another question. And one thing I was never quite 100% sure on, when the ruinous powers came and took the Primarchs away, were they like infants or were they full grown people in like a vat almost at that point?
Yeah, so they were created in vats, grown from like nothing, and then whisked away in those vats, and then those vats were then drop potted across the galaxy onto planet. So yeah, some definitely were found as children, like they woke up as children, but others were like fully grown adults essentially by the time they were found, or by the time that pod opened up and unleashed them. Yeah, quote unquote adults. Like, yeah, they were 7 years old, but they looked like they were 40.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because the growth acceleration thing, where they had that growth accelerator, where like they basically reach maturity by like age 10, and then at that point they just stop aging. So, I mean, I could go on about this, but I'll save it for like when we actually cover each individual Primarch.
So one interesting thing to note is we'll jump into Astartes, and like they kind of fought during the Wars of Unification on Terra, the back end of it. Oftentimes we know about the Thunder Warriors and how they were the heavy lifting bit of the Emperor's army at that point. But during the end of it, they definitely did have some of these legions kicking about, like the Dark Angels. They were there doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So That's kind of interesting. That definitely is a little bit of an addition. Like I don't ever, new lore kind of as they write more about it, they kind of inserted them. And I was talking to somebody on the Discord today, and they were saying that they even took part of purging some of the Thunder Warriors and stuff. These Astartes, that could get lost in the weeds, and who even remembers any of that shit at 10,000 years, anyways. But it's interesting to kind of go back and how far back they really go. Like we learned on the last episode too that the Primarch Project took hundreds of years to complete. It wasn't just like, yeah, oh, let's make this little thing, and then 7 years later, now that we have these that grown things, like it was 100-year project. So he had great ambitions, the Emperor, before he even left Terra.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So let's actually go into the Astartes just a little bit. So the Legiones Astartes. The Space Marine legions, known as the Legiones Astartes in High Gothic, were the first and most formidable formations of the Emperor's superhuman warriors crafted during the first founding on Terra in the late 30th millennium. This momentous creation occurred amidst the flames of the Unification Wars, a time when the Emperor sought to unite the scattered remnants of humanity beneath his banner, yet before the dawn of the Great Crusade. As the legions were mustered and the Emperor's armies took to the stars, they stood at the vanguard of his imperial expeditionary fleet, their purpose clear: to bring the stars back to the fold of the Imperium in time. As these warriors forged their path across the galaxy, the legions were renamed the Space Marines, and their once legendary formations were known as the Space Marine Legions.
Yeah, and at this point, none of these legions were led by their Primarchs. This original push out into the galaxy was just the Space Marines. And even back then, though, they take the way it happened. They take the Emperor's gene seed and they boiled it down and they made the Primarchs from it. Then they took the Primarch's gene seed, boiled it down, and made Space Marines from it. And there's these character bits that even at these early ages of the Great Crusade that carried through. Some of them were known for being more sneaky right away, or I mentioned last time the flesh change in the Thousand Sons was happening, even though they didn't have their Primarch. Some of these kind of developments happened very early on in their creation and during the Great Crusade.
Mm-hmm. That kind of begs the question. I was like, who actually led each legion before the Primarch was discovered? I know I've heard some talks through the Discord and through some other lore tubers or whatnot, but I was curious to see what you heard or what you knew about that.
Yeah, I would imagine they just had the best kind of. They had chapter masters. They had their whole legion breakdown or whatever. They had captains and stuff. So I'd just imagine that it was just some Terran-born recruit that was just the best. Maybe the odd time you might have had like a custodes leading them, but I really don't think that would have been common or for very long. And then the other big thing that was leading them during the Great Crusade in the beginning was the Emperor himself was leading these legions in battle and going to planets and be like, I am the Emperor. Here is my army. You got two options: compliance, which I recommend, or annihilation.
I guess I'm going to comply if you're going to annihilate me. I mean, what choice do I really have?
I mean, yeah, as I said, it doesn't sound much like a choice. So,
so I've got a kind of a chicken and an egg question for you then. If they were being led before they had their Primarchs, each legion kind of has its own feel and customs and culture to it. When the Primarchs got introduced, did the Primarchs adopt the cultures that these legions already had, or did the legions kind of start to adopt the culture and these traditions that the Primarchs put back into them?
Yeah, like they always talk about Terran-born Marines, and like during the Horus Heresy, you hear about these Terran-born Marines that are like 200 years old now at this point. But yeah, ultimately they adopted the culture of the planet that they started recruiting from. Um, the things that they kind of had built in them was more like their nature. Like, were they overly aggressive, or were they psychically bound, or like were they more sneaky or whatever? It was kind of more stuff like that, more so than like an actual culture and rituals, because all that stuff would have been very just basic imperial reason and imperial kind of doctrine at that point, which wasn't religious and stuff. It was grounded in science.
Mm-hmm. And my understanding too, like most of the times, it was as after the Primarch was discovered. For the most part, they followed, I guess, like that genetic je ne sais quoi, as they say, and but then kind of folded into what Mark was saying with like the culture at the planet that they were on, and then as the Great Crusade went on, more and more the legions were formed the uh, from the home planet of the Primarchs, and then when the Horus Heresy happened, and there was a certain purging, a lot of the ones that were purged in the very beginning were the Terran-born Astartes, because they were obviously would have been more loyal to the Emperor, after everything kind of fell apart. So
I got you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like you imagine one of these recruits like who grew up with the Primarch on his planet and like the mythos of that, as opposed to growing up on Terra and hearing kind of the mythos and living the mythos of the Emperor. So yeah, that like loyalty definitely was to them.
mm-hmm.
Just on this kind of thought process too of just what kind of happened with some of these legions. Some of them did change their name, like we're talking about the Warhounds, who later became the World Eaters with Angron. There was a bunch. I think the Death Guard changed their name from the Dusk Raiders to the Death Guard. There's a bunch of them that did change their names and stuff when they got or when they found their Primarch. And then the other little tidbit of a detail that we'll throw in, and this is kind of speculation. Some people think it's canon, and it's one of those things that's very open to interpretation. But lots of people talk about how the Emperor created the Primarchs for a very specific purpose beyond just being uh, military war generals. We'll talk about Magnus the Red again. He was supposed to sit on the Golden Throne and be a part of the Webway project, and that was kind of his role, where other ones are very clear. Like Gilliman was probably supposed to be some type of statesman. Alfarius Omegon, probably maybe some covert ops kind of guys, like maybe some type of secret organization. You can kind of go through them, and each one kind of had this like specific reason why the Emperor built them. So that's another way that kind of was built into their genetic code, which was then passed down onto the Space Marines. So it's kind of that unavoidable little bit of thing that bleeds down and through and into everyone.
Oh, that's super interesting.
Oh yeah, and Purge here basically just iterated everything that you said in the comments. The Emperor had certain roles for the Primarchs. I'd imagine he trained them for certain tactics with that in mind. So exactly what you were saying.
Yeah, exactly. So that's another way that they got kind of that culture and flavor and style that we know and love before they even found their Primarchs.
I guess continuing on, we'll talk about. Find my place. In those early days, the Legiones Astartes were not the specialized strike forces they would become in the 41st millennium, but the backbone of the Imperium's military might. As the primary frontline force of the Emperor's ancient domain, they were the hammer that brought the Emperor's will to the farthest reaches of mankind's scattered worlds. Their might was unmatched, their purpose unyielding. But the course of history would not remain the same. In the aftermath of the second founding, the Astra Militarum arose, taking the mantle of Imperium's primary armed force. The once great legions, diminished in number and stature, became the Space Marine chapters, their roles altered. No longer would they stand as the Imperium's first line of defense. Instead, they became the Emperor's chosen special forces, swift and deadly, their presence felt in the most critical of moments. The Space Marines, once the towering warriors of humanity's vast armies, now served as a refined blade in the galaxy that had long since known the weight of their war. And I think it's important to kind of note that, you think the main portion of the Imperial military would be the Imperial Guard, which one didn't actually exist in 30K as we know it. But it's just like you think of these space marines, these rare specimens of like peak human technology and performance. These guys were supposed to be the front lines. It's just kind of interesting to think how like it was all backwards compared to 10,000 years later.
Yeah, the custodes, they are individually crafted and meticulous, and they take time. Where what was so great about the Astartes is you could mass produce them very easily, and all of a sudden you have 100,000 Astartes in a legion marching on a planet. And just imagine that, nowadays, if you see a whole chapter in one location, you're like, oh my God, it's Armageddon. But they used to drop down 100,000 Astartes and be like, well, like I said, comply or die. Yeah.
I mean, could you imagine if the Horus Heresy never took place and you still had those legions? Just probably how much better the Imperium would be in the current setting than how it actually is.
Yeah, Tyranids and Necron all of a sudden don't seem so scary.
Especially now, yeah, as you're saying, when you have 100,000 Space Marines coming in at a low orbit.
Another thing we mentioned kind of, and you touched on very briefly, Gerald, is just the Astra Militarum and how they weren't the primary force because, yeah, they didn't exist. It was just the Imperial Army, and that was kind of consisted of both Navy, like airborne aircraft, and foot soldiers and tanks and stuff. Where after the Horus Heresy, just like the Space Marines were kind of broken up and broken down, to avoid the Horus Heresy again from being like, if something like that happened again, it would be less detrimental. So they broke it down into Imperial Navy, Astra Militarum, and they kind of broke it down into regiments and just, decentralized power a little bit more.
So where would the Solar Auxilia kind of fall into all of that with the Imperial Army and everything?
Honestly, I don't have a good answer for you on that one, buddy. I don't know much about them beyond that they have sick void suit armor and that they're kind of from the Sol system. But I imagine they're just another kind of Imperial regiment. I don't know if there's anything necessarily special with them, but I like I said, I could be very wrong on that.
How dare you don't know?
I do know in the new Legion Imperialis, the Horus Heresy game that just came out from Games Workshop, they've got some pretty sweet epic scale models for the Solar Auxiliary. Very cool.
They're so cool, man. That would be a fun episode. I gotta write that down. Well, maybe when we do like those 3 episodes in between, we cover some of those things like the Solar Auxiliary, or maybe we do an episode of minor Xenos that were wiped out during the Great Crusade. There's a bunch of filler stuff that we can kind of thematically keep 30K.
Well, let's get into a little bit on the organization of the legions. The smallest formation within the early ranks of the Legion Astartes are within the Logos Terra Militia of old, was the squad, comprising a group of Astartes under the command of a non-commissioned officer, the sergeant. These squads varied greatly in both size and purpose. Typically, they numbered between 10 and 20 Space Marines, those specialized squads, such as tasked with reconnaissance, or those diminished by battle, could be far smaller, often no more than a handful of warriors. The chain of command within the legions are simple and unyielding. The officers, towering giants of battle in their own right, led their Astartes into war with a personal, almost brutal determination. These mighty warriors embodied the spirit of the techno-barbarian tribes of old Earth, leading from the front, placing themselves where the fight was the thickest. For them, battle was more than just an act of overcoming an enemy. It was an annihilation. The only acceptable victory was the total destruction of those who stood against the Emperor. This unyielding logic, forged by the inhuman strength and unwavering resolve, created a force whose very presence instilled dread across the battlefield. Friend and foe alike recoiled at the sight of these warriors, whose reputations was forged across countless campaigns. They were come to be known as the Angels of Death, a title earned not by mercy, but by the cold, ruthless effectiveness with which they obliterated all who dared oppose the Emperor. It was the name that was spoken in fear and awe for millennium to come. What a cool title. Yeah.
The Angels of Death, man. So cool. Yeah. The legions were pretty simple when they first started out. They weren't so fanciful as we have them nowadays, where they basically just had chapters within the legion. Each chapter was led by a chapter master, and then they had captains, and then they had sergeants, and it was kind of just that very simple formation where, as the Great Crusade went on and as they found more stuff, eventually they implemented a whole bunch of different ranks and specialties and all that kind of stuff. But to begin with, it was very simple. Like, you got 10 to 20 Astartes, they have one leader, and that's probably going to be enough to do a whole lot of damage.
Yeah, I always thought so. You always hear the Astra Militarum, like if a space marine drops out of orbit, they call them like the Emperor's Angels. I always thought that was something to do with like them coming in these dire moments and stuff. I never realized that it was actually part of this title, the Angel of Death.
Intrigation and development. The legions of the Great Crusade were a fusion of dual natures. They were the product of the Emperor's conquest of Terra and the Sol system. Selected from Terran stock and molded by the wars of the nascent Imperium, these legions had certain commonality of character. A sense of unity and almost familiar bond pervaded their ranks. Given that they were all of the first generation of Astartes, born of Terra, they shared the imprint of the genetic forging and warlike history. It is no surprise that the members of the early legion regarded each other as siblings and brothers in arms. And yeah, even just to kind of further expand on that thought, if the emperor is the father, and then the Primarchs are his sons, quote unquote, and then the Astartes are the sons, quote unquote, of the Primarchs. The Astartes from different legions are kind of like cousins to each other then. And we get this kind of family tree that branches down and out. And yeah, I could definitely imagine in that very early Great Crusade where they all come from Terra and they're going and they're conquering other human factions and Xenos as well. But just how close and like how strong of a bond that would be. We're all from this one spot. We all remember the very start of this crusade. Training, indoctrination, and the shared experience of battle reinforce this belief within the Legion Astartes, encouraging the idea that they were a family born in the cradle of war. This bond of brotherhood would survive as the Imperium grew, but perhaps it was never as strong as it was when the legions first conquered the techno-barbarians under the Terran sun. The second phase of each legion was that of the people and the cultures which had flourished under the stars. As the war to unify Terra became a crusade to conquer the galaxy, the legions grew. Casualties would be replaced, and as the wars grew in scale, so did the number of losses and the number of recruits that were needed to take the places of the fallen. Initially, intakes were drawn from Luna, Saturn's orbital stations, the proximal worlds, and a dozen worlds near the segmentum solar fed the legion's need for warrior stock. As this occurred, the Terran foundations of each legion became diluted, but was never overwhelmed. For the warrior tribes and cultures of old Earth were many, and their commitment to the Great Crusade resolute. Yeah, that's a cool thought too. Like, as they slowly go out and before they actually find their Primarch and their home world, like, how did they reinforce their numbers? Well, it was mostly from Terra, but there was a couple other key spots where it was so clearly under the authority of the Imperium at that point that, yeah, they could kind of trust it and not feel like, okay, we're now recruiting from this human empire that we just conquered last year, and now all these, we're turning their civilians into super soldiers that fight alongside us. Like, that probably wouldn't work out well all the time, but
Not quite.
Remind me, the Great Crusade lasted what, like 200 years? Is right around there?
Mm-hmm.
yep.
That is amazing how quickly they can spread out and just conquer back all these thousands of worlds and spread out and set their footholds.
Yeah, like the output of machines that the Mechanicum and the Mars was doing at that time, like the amount of fleets that were being produced and all that kind of stuff would have been outlandish.
Oh, I could only imagine. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I find it kind of funny how like we all know that during old Earth, like Terra was just like racked with nothing but civil war, all these like techno barbarians and stuff, and then like you hear all these other planets like within just like the segments of Solar and be like, I wonder what's happening down over at Terra. I don't know. It's just some backwater place now. Wait a second. What's all these ships doing here? Holy shit! Who are these guys? Who are these 8 feet tall monstrosities?
Yeah. And as they spread out across the galaxy, they pull up to other worlds where it's like, Terra? You guys are from Terra? We thought that planet was lost. Like, we haven't heard for Terra in 10,000 years, and now you guys show up with this army. Yeah, and like a bunch of different empires had a bunch of different takes to such an event happening.
Mm-hmm.
You have now been forcefully liberated. You're welcome.
Jackson, the last episode, called the Emperor a compassionate tyrant. He rules
Oh,
over you for
y-
your benefit.
yeah.
He really loves you.
That is an apt description, 100%.
We shall become a empire of peace and love by force.
Yeah. With the rediscovery of the Primarchs, and in many cases newly adopted homeworlds used as the Legion's fiefs, most commonly the worlds upon which the Legion's new master had been found, this was to change the character of the Legions profoundly. Some alterations were superficial, a habit of speech, a change in close quarter tactics, martial traditions, and warranted additions to iconography and even language. But for others, the change would prove dramatic, with entire paragrams? What the fuck?
Paradigm.
Man, that's crazy. You read that word 1,000 times. Anyways.
All good.
Oh, yeah. Back to my reading lessons. Trevor Buzak, where you at? Tradition and even ideology overriding what had come before, such as in what came to be known as the Space Wolves, Blood Angels, and Dark Angels legions. In many cases, the stamp of the legions and the will of the Primarchs on the recruits came to largely outweigh differences of birth or blood. But in other legions, such as the Luna Wolves or the Emperor's Children, subtle divide would grow between those veterans who had been recruited into the ranks of the Astartes by the Emperor from Terra and those who had come into the Legion from the Primarch's homeworld. This rift would be one factor among what would lead to several of the first founding legions ultimately turning towards damnation. By the middle years of the Great Crusade, the ongoing effects of these shifts within the legions have resulted in widespread disparity in culture, organization between them. The outward sign of this was the development of distinct character, which meant that the original Terran military patterns they had adhered to at the outset of the Great Crusade had largely been abandoned or become so modified and diluted as to be seen, in some cases, unrecognizable. Yeah, like we kind of mentioned, some changed their name and their color scheme completely, forgetting their Terran-born kind of lineage altogether, essentially. And as you stop recruiting from Terra and you just recruit from your home world, like who cares about Terra ultimately? You can really just get personal from where your own planet already has its own 10,000 year history. There were, of course, exceptions in whole or in part, such as could be found within the Ultramarines or the Iron Warriors Legion, who built upon rather than abandoning what had gone before, as well as those such as the White Scars, to who the strictures and precepts laid out by the official militaris were no longer even notionally applied. There are those who have cited the increasing idiosyncrasies and hindsights as the seeds of division of the sense of insularity and otherness growing between the legions and another. This itself only fueled rivalries and feuds that had begun to simmer beneath the surface of the Great Crusade, both the Primarchs and their legions that would later be exploited by Horus and his heretical conspiracy, and lay them open to the indoctrination of the Davenite warrior lodge cult structures into those legions he favored. These warrior lodges were avenues by which the stain of the warp would later taint those legions that turned traitor.
These warrior lodges, are they still a thing in 40K, or were they pretty much abolished during the Horus Heresy, like afterwards?
Yeah, like at that point, it evolves another time where now they're not like a secret organization. I almost look at those warrior lodges as like Freemasons, a secret cult. You got to know the secret handshake to get in.
Yeah.
They're not just telling everyone about it, but eventually it just goes into full on like, hey, if you're not sacrificing your soul to chaos, you're not a part of us at all. Yeah, so it definitely transformed and got rid of, and what was once hidden in the shadows was now free to be out in the open.
Yeah, because I think the original intent of those warrior lodges were like, we all know how the emperor is such a compassionate tyrant. Well, the original purpose was to make them like give the Astartes and like maybe their serfs like kind of free reign to somewhat discuss like possibly possible ideals that were contrary to what the emperor wanted them to think. But then of course that, like what Mark was saying, really opened up the rift to open the floodgates to chaos. So by the time of 30 and 40K, by the time of 40K, like that's pretty much gone. At least from the loyalist legions, you might see that in the Chaos War bands, but not to the extent of what they were back during the Great Crusade.
Gotcha.
Like you kind of said, it was a safe spot to discuss kind of newer ideas. The galaxy is full of all these interesting concepts and all the different things you would encounter that the emperor was trying to keep most of humanity from. He was trying to build an empire on reason and logic and no religion. So then you start going across different alien races and you're like, they had some type of magic. We can't describe it, but like, what were they up to? What were these dark pacts that they were signing up to? They start seeing demons for the first time. Like, what the fuck was that? And it was this place to kind of talk about those kind of things without feeling like you're going to get the emperor's eye upon you, who wanted a society of reason and logic and anti-religion.
Oh, I could imagine, especially as they're coming more and more into contact with the Eldari.
Yeah, what are the Eldar pantheon? Are they warp entities? Are they gods? Are they powerful Eldar? Like, who knows? But like, you come across the avatar of Cain and you're just like, what the hell? Like, is that a god? Like, well, first of all, what is a god? Like,
That's a whole topic we could spend an episode debating. Is a Catan shard a god? The Pantheon, yeah.
It's like you see a non-compliant world and like some weird cultists just start saying mumbo jumbo. All of a sudden, one guy's head explodes, another one, like a rift in space time, just swallows them up and then belches them out. So you're just like, I've never seen this before. What the hell is this? How do I kill it? So
yeah, you did the sign of the Aquila. Yeah.
But I guess we'll talk about some legion structure now. By the time of the outbreak of the interlegionary hostilities during the Isstvan III atrocity, the command and organizational structure of a Space Marine Legion was often more a mirror of the character and preferences of its Primarch and its abiding culture than formal writ. While certain formations and features were common as an outgrowth of practical manners, such as deployment and logistics, the organization and use was far from standardized. During the Great Crusade, there were numerous terms for the internal constituent units of a Space Marine Legion, from largest to smallest: great companies, regiments, chapters, battalions, cohorts, demi-chapters, companies, squads, and maniples. Is that maniples? That's what I'm calling it. Most often, the practical reality of their disposition would vary still more as terminology used within different legions for equivalent ranks and specializations bore the mark of the legion's character rather than the desires of the Imperium's central administrators for a common nomenclature. In some cases, this discrepancy increased as local languages and dialects such as Fendrisian or Khahad come to replace the Imperial Terran, the forerunner of High Gothic. With these caveats in mind, the strategic disposition of a Space Marine Legion chart above describes the broad and most common structural basis of an Astartes Legion, as well as some more commonly used terminology of rank in the latter half of the Great Crusade.
Yeah, just further developing, and like, even at this point, we were mentioning the Warrior Lodge, like, this is all just evolving. They start getting those in there. But even after, everything just keeps evolving and changing. And eventually everything gets broken down in the Second Founding, or the Chaos Legions are shattered and during the Great Scouring. And then everything kind of spreads out and changes again. And now you got Chaos Warbands who might be from multiple legions or whatever running around. So, yeah. Cool, kind of just to see these guys develop and grow, and just how much, like this is why I think everyone likes Space Marines, because there's so many different types. There's a Space Marine for everyone. Whatever you're kind of into when it comes to your approach to warfare, you could find one of these legions. If you like Roman themed Space Marines, you go to your Ultramarines, and you can kind of just slot into these different cultural things that you like.
And compared to other models, they're a lot easier to paint too.
Yeah,
I have seen some really impressive Space Marine paint jobs. Like there's some out there that are so cool. But let's get on. I'm gonna kind of talk a little bit about each of the legions, their orders and tactics and culture. There's a lot of them, so I'm gonna kind of keep it brief. But as I'm going through it, if you guys have anything you want to kind of mention about it, just let me know. But first up, we've got the Dark Angels. So they're known as masters of adaptability. They employed a wide range of specialized tactics, excelling in both close quarters combat and ranged warfare. And their culture is deeply rooted in ancient Terran knightly traditions. They're valued honor and loyalty above all, but harbored secretive and esoteric traditions. So yeah, it's like the talking about with the Freemasons. You give that secret handshake and you're tapping Morse code on the wrist before you before you're allowed to talk openly about different things. The second is a Lost Legion, so there's no record available on that one. But for the third, we've got the Emperor's Children. They're relentlessly precise. They pursued perfection in every engagement, often seeking to achieve victory with elegance and minimal losses. Their culture is driven by the ideal of faultless execution, their pursuit of personal and martial perfection defined by their ethos. Four Iron Warriors. They're siege warfare specialists. They excelled in grinding attrition battles and unyielding fortifications. They're also super difficult to paint, just because of like their whole color scheme and
I
everything.
love the hazard stripes, man.
Oh man, no, especially when it's that small.
Oh man, it's they look great when it's done well. They look great when it's
Mhm.
done well, but man, trying to get it right.
And then they are harsh and pragmatic legion. They fostered a stoic, often resentful mindset, placing efficiency above glory. The White Scars, that is Legion number 5. Tactics swift and mobile. They employ devastating hit and run strategies with unmatched expertise in lightning warfare. They're rooted in steep warrior traditions of chivalrous. They prized freedom, honor, and the art of war. For number 6 is the Space Wolves. They're ferocious shock troopers. They specialize in overwhelming the enemy with brutal close quarters assaults. They draw their culture from warrior traditions of Fenris. They value strength, cunning, and fierce sense of loyalty to their kin. You've got the Imperial Fists, masters of defensive warfare. They are unmatched in building and holding fortifications. And then they too are steeped in discipline and duty. They embodied a stoic commitment to the Emperor's vision, often to the point of self sacrifice. Everyone's favorite Night Lords. Terror tactics and psychological warfare were their hallmarks, breaking enemies' will before the first blow is even struck. Their culture reflects the grim justice of Nostromo, the reveled in fear and punishment, often pushing the limits of brutality. Blood Angels are masters of aerial assault. They combine devastating shock strikes with relentless melee combat. And they are refined and artistic. They were driven by the tragic nobility of their Primarch Sanguinius, striving to temper their violent tendencies. And then you also have the Iron Hands, mechanized warfare experts. They relied heavily on tanks, dreadnoughts, and cybernetic enhancements. And their culture is obsessed with strength and the purity of machine. They're scorned weakness in all forms, adhering to cold, logical ethos.
And then we jump to the 11th Legion, which is unknown. No records are available. So we'll jump to the 12th, the World Eaters, and their tactics were frenzied, close combat berserkers. They sought to destroy their foes in the bloodiest way possible. Their culture, rooted in the brutal traditions of their Primarch Angron, they valued martial prowess above strategy, often succumbing to their savage impulses. The 13th Legion of the Ultramarines, tactics, masters of combined arms and strategic flexibility, they excelled at efficiently coordinating vast military campaigns. Their culture embodied the structured and orderly ideals of their Primarch, Root Gilliman. They forged a disciplined and pragmatic warrior culture. The 14th Legion of the Death Guard, their tactics were resilient and implacable. They specialized in attritional warfare, enduring hardships that would break others. Their culture shaped by the harsh environment of Barbaros, yeah, of course. They valued endurance and loyalty, priding themselves on their grim determination. The 15th Legion, the Thousand Suns, their tactics were adept psychers. They wielded sorcery and advanced psychic warfare to devastating effect. Their culture were scholars and seekers of knowledge. They revered intellect and arcane power, following their Primarch Magnus' insatiable quest for understanding. The 16th Legion, the Luna Wolves, eventually the Sons of Horus, bold and aggressive, they excelled at rapid strikes and decisive high-risk maneuvers. Their culture, inspired by their charismatic Primarch Horus, they embodied a sense of loyalty and ambition that made them natural leaders of the Great Crusade. The 17th Legion, the Word Bearers, their tactics involved masters of indoctrination and zealous warfare. They combined fanatical devotion with overwhelming numbers and coordinated assaults. Their culture was deeply rooted in spiritual and devotion. They sought to spread the Emperor's truth across the stars, often to an obsessive degree. The 13th Legion, the 18th, the Salamanders, tactics, experts in close-range firefights and attritional combat. They utilized flamers and melta weaponry to devastating effect. Their culture, rooted in humanitarian traditions of their Primarch Vulcan. I don't know about that, but I had to put that in there, it's very humane how they crush baby Xenos underfoot and stuff. Very, very nice.
Or set fire.
Set them on fire, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. Xenos have no rights, so.
This is true, yes. They upheld a strong sense of duty to protect humanity. The 19th Legion, the Raven Guard, their tactics were masters of stealth and guerrilla warfare. They struck from the shadows before the enemy could even respond. Their culture, reflecting the somber ethos of their homeworld Deliverance, they valued precision and self-reliance over glory. And the final Legion, the Alpha Legion, the 20th Legion, their tactics were espionage and subterfuge, defining their warfare, sowing chaos and confusion before striking decisively. Their culture, a cryptic and enigmatic Legion, they valued secrecy and manipulation, often operating independently of their Primarch's direct oversight. Yeah, so we went through that whole list of the 20 of them very quick, because like I said, we're just on the journey of 72 episodes of unpacking all of these guys. So, that gives you a little flavor maybe for you to kind of poke your head in to find out a little bit more if one of those spoke to you. But that's a nice little teaser for you.
Yeah, so please don't get upset with us tonight that we didn't go over X campaign with Y Legion and and then Z Primarch. So yeah, this is just like Mark said, this is just a teaser.
Yeah, we're setting up the context of who all these things are. If you've heard us talk about Primarchs and Legions so much, but we're getting slowly deeper and deeper into the weeds of it.
And so, like we kind of mentioned before, they actually did have a couple of legions did have different names. So let's talk about that. The Astartes legions, created under the direct command of the Emperor, were initially drawn from Terra itself. These Terran-born space marines held the legacy of their birthplace deeply in their hearts, for it was from Terra's ranks that they first rose to the Emperor's cause. In these early days, the legions were shaped by the cultural traditions and ethos of Terra. Before the Emperor's lost sons, the Primarchs were rediscovered. When the first of the Primarchs emerged, the fabric of the legions began to shift. The Terran warriors who had once stood united under the Emperor's command now found themselves under the sway of their newly discovered leaders. Loyalty shifted from Terra to the Primarchs, and some of the legions even took on new names that reflected the personalities and values of these godlike beings. The Emperor, confident in the strength of his son's loyalty, saw no issue with this development, trusting that his bond with them would remain unbroken. A tragic miscalculation, for though the Primarchs embodied the physical and mental perfection, they were still bound by the same flaws of humanity, greed, anger, and the hunger for power that would one day lead them down the paths of damnation. The first Primarch to be found was Horus, discovered on the war-torn world of Chthoniya. Horus, the Emperor's favored son, was elevated to the rank of War Master, and his legion, the Luna Wolves, was renamed the Sons of Horus in his honor after surviving a mortal wound on the moon of Davin.
I just imagine, man, the Emperor leaves Terra with all his legions, and they conquer planet after planet, and they finally come across the first Primarch, and how, what a trip that would be. The celebrations that would be had. We're finally reunited with one of the Emperor's sons. And this legion gets this honor of being the first to be found. And all the other legions, it must have been whispers going out amongst them. Like, does that mean our Primarch is out there? I thought they were lost. And a lot of time, maybe they didn't even know that Primarchs even existed. And this might have been the first time they even heard of this.
Well, and as far as we know
Yeah.
about the 2nd and the 11th Primarchs, I was going to make this joke earlier, but I'll make it now. Intergalactic hide and seek champions, 10,000 years going strong, baby.
I'm sure the Emperor's got a trophy for them awaiting on the Golden Throne. I just think it's funny too that Horse is referred to as the Emperor's favorite son, but he's the first Primarch to be found. So it's really easy to be the favorite son when you're the only son currently.
Yeah, yeah. I made this joke on the last Primarch Project episode where, yeah, you know, it's easy to get along with one son, and then you have two, and you're invested in both those sons. But by the time you have 20 different kids running around, you don't really know much about them. You're not investing as much time into the 20th guy that you found.
Okay, I know, Nick. You said you're not as knowledgeable of the Primarchs, but my question for Mark is: have you read any of the Primarch centered books for the Horus Heresy?
No, I haven't. I probably got up to like book 40 roughly in the Horus Heresy series before I was kind of just like I don't know if I caught up to where they were, but I forget what.
Let me rephrase. You got the mainline Horus Heresy books, but then there's like a Primarch series with one book dedicated to each Primarch, except for Horus. Have you read any of those?
No, I didn't read any of those.
Okay.
Yeah, like Primarchs are an interesting character. I don't want to shit on them too much because they are interesting. But I always found just the more you try to write about these characters, these godlike beings, the more I kind of just get disillusioned with them, where it's like, how do you really transfer that awe and that? How do you make an interesting character interesting when they're supposed to be gods? Like, why do these characters make the most silliest of mistakes? Now you got to try to explain that out. And yeah,
I agree with you 100%. I definitely like keeping it more to the mystery side of it. And as you were saying, like getting together with friends and discussing all these possibilities and stuff. You know, you don't want to always have to just read it verbatim in a book and that be the new fact. And now you can't put these fun ideas to it.
I'd like to call back to a previous Lorehammer episode when y'all were talking about the Primarchs or whatnot. I think it was Christian that made the point of like maybe the original intent of the writers was like kind of put them in a similar pedestal to like the Greek and Norse pantheons because like they were godlike beings that were also completely fucked up in personality and the stuff that they did. So, which you know, that could be a fair assessment, but.
yeah, and you know, everything kind of gets amplified with them too. Like, so, you know, the bigger you are, the harder you fall type concept where, yeah, okay, they're super intelligent, but that also means that when, you know, they have emotional outbreaks or whatever, they're just that much more severe. Where normally like they can kind of keep down whatever emotions, but when it does break through that crack, then it's like something really big.
Gotcha. So, Gerald, are you saying that the Emperor is actually Zeus?
You know?
Or is Atlas Zeus?
Ooh, that's a good point.
Things to consider. Things to consider.
Things to consider.
He's running calculations in his tech priest brain right now.
Yep, that's why you see the smoke coming. That's why you see the smoke coming from my hood.
Gerald, have you read any of those Primarch books?
I've read the Alfarius book, and I made it about partway through the Lionel Johnson book, and then I just got once it seems to be always the case with me. I just got busy with work and life and other things, so
Sure.
I have a hard copy of all of the books though. So I do plan on
Crazy.
actually going through all of them. So,
Nice.
The Alfarius book was fantastic, but though, by the way, so.
What about the Lionel Johnson one? I know you said you're kind of in the midst of that. Is that worth a read?
The parts I read, it was kind of interesting. I didn't get too terribly far into it. I think because there was like a lot of setup in the very beginning before you actually got to meet the lion. But it at least that little part that I read did kind of ring true to like his known personality being like the stoic, more calculated of the Primarchs. So, but yeah.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, Sanguinius has always been my favorite, but I've always wanted to learn more about Lionel Johnson because I'd say he's probably a close second. I just don't honestly know that much. So yeah, definitely have to look into that book. And now that he has a tabletop mini, which is a badass mini,
Yeah.
yeah, kind of pull me into it even more.
Oh yeah.
Have you read Descent of Angels, the book where Lionel Johnson is on Caliban? Oh, lots of people didn't like it because most of the
Mhm.
book was set on Caliban with just a lion doing stuff with the Knightly Order. But I fucking loved it. I thought that was such a cool planet and such a cool concept, and like this super demigod just fighting beasts in the wilderness before this Knightly Order comes and finds him. Very cool.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Bookshop Bill in the chat says, "I like the guy with the iron hands."
Ferris Manus.
Yes, a man named Iron Hand, with his legion of iron hands. What do you think they're known for? Hmm.
Hmm. Soft hands?
Their iron feet.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yep. And for anyone in the chat that's interested in learning about these Primarch books, if you're looking for a physical copy, good luck because those are out of print and they are super expensive if you try to find them. So,
So you're just flaunting, flexing on us, eh?
anyways, but yeah, thank you, GW, for having way too low a stock on some potentially really good books and then not printing them ever again.
That seems so crazy.
So, Tech Priest Gerald, where do you live again?
612, kiss my. Oh.
Purge asked, not to go back to the earlier part of the show, but the Terran-born Marines had their Primarch gene seed, correct? Yeah, for sure. Like all the Astartes had the gene seed of their Primarch at the time, for sure. We do in the next low section, we talk a lot more about their gene seed and stuff, and maybe we'll have some more answers for you there.
Yes, we'll just keep on. We'll just keep this going. The first legion was named the Dark Angels by their Primarch Lionel darn it. Okay, the first legion was named the Dark Angels by their Primarch Lionel Johnson. Mortarian's 14th Legion, once called the Dusk Raiders, became the Death Guard, reflecting the grim nature of their master. The Emperor's children, once the 3rd Legion, were granted the exalted name only after Fulgrim's speech, so moved the Emperor that he bestowed it upon the Legion as a mark of honor. The 5th Legion, originally called the Star Legion, originally called the Star Hunters, was reborn as the White Scars when Jagatai Khan took command. The 9th Legion, once known as the Revenant Legion, earned their title due to their uncanny ability to regenerate from death and their practice of taking on the identities of fallen officers. This strange ability was attributed to the omophagia implant, which allowed them to consume the flesh of the slain and inherit their memories and skills. When Sanguinius, their noble Primarch, found them, he renamed them the Blood Angels, seeking to reshape them in his image. The 12th Legion, the Warhounds, was renamed the World Eaters after their brutal and bloodthirsty Primarch Angron. The 16th Legion, 17th Legion, originally called the Imperial Heralds, became the Word Bearers when Lorgar, their deeply devout Primarch, sought to spread the Emperor's divinity to every corner of the galaxy. Lorgar's tragic mistake would lead to his legion down a path of heresy that would echo through the ages. The 20th Legion, shrouded in secrecy, was known only as the Ghost Legion for much of the early Great Crusade. Operating in the shadows, their presence was only felt when they arrived as reinforcements during the darkest hours of the Rangdan genocides. It was only much later that their true nature and their pivotal role in the Emperor's plan would come to light.
So we're just getting a little deeper in where, they find their Primarch and the Legion shifts and change. And, the Primarchs, they themselves want to often rebuild these legions in their image. Like we mentioned how much of a trip it would be for these legions to find out, oh shit, we found our Primarch. But also the trip of these Primarchs who know nothing about the Emperor potentially. Some of them definitely did beforehand through psychic means and stuff, psychic communication. But the vast majority of them didn't know, and they definitely didn't know that they had 1,000 children, 100,000 children running around ready to, carry their banner and wage war in their name.
Hell, I have a harder time with 2. I can't imagine having that many.
Oh, goddamn.
Yeah. So when I was first getting into 40K lore and I knew nothing about it, the very first time I ever heard Lionel Johnson's name, I thought it was Lionel Space Johnson. I was like, man, he sounds like a country singer.
That's Mr. Johnson to you.
And the thing I always find funny, and shout out to one of my friends who's a big time World Eater guy, is like Angron's reasoning for renaming his legion the World Eaters, because if I remember correctly, it was he did not like the idea of being called the Warhounds, because he says something to the effect of, we're not like the Space Wolves. I am not your damn lapdog." So he
Yeah.
doesn't want to be. So yeah.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense with him because he grew up in the slave fighting pits. Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So you make it all the way to the top, you're finally free. I wouldn't want to be referred to a dog, because that's probably what he's being called the whole time by his masters and things like that.
And another fun little tidbit too there is whoever actually wrote down in the Imperial records the World Eaters Legion wrote that down wrong during Angron's speech when he was talking to Karn during his kind of first re-encounter with his legion. He actually said, "We will be eaters of worlds," and that you can take that to the bank. But they didn't think that sounded as correct, so they changed it. Somebody changed it along the way.
I think World Eaters is a pretty cool title.
No, eaters of worlds. And table flipped.
Oh, sorry. Heresy.
Heresy.
Well, let's get into a little bit on some of the gene seeds for these legions. So the gene seed is the vital genetic material that underpins the creation of the superhuman warriors known as the Adeptus Astartes. The term encompasses the germ cells and viral machinery meticulously engineered to develop into specialized organs implanted into human adolescent males, reshaping him into a transhuman space marine. Crafted in the 30th millennium by the Emperor of Mankind and the scientists of his biotechnical division, the gene seed was forged in the gene laboratories buried deep in the Himalayan mountains. Using the genomes of the 20 Primarchs as the templates, the Emperor designed these transformative processes to embody his vision of humanity's ultimate protectors. The term gene seed, most often referred to as the material harvested from the Astartes progenoid glands, progenoid?
Progenoid.
Yep. A task entrusted to Space Marines apothecaries. The genetic treasure is crucial for creating the next generation of Space Marine. Each piece of gene seed corresponds to the one of the 19 specialized organs that must be implanted to complete the transformation into one of the Astartes. Many of these organs, particularly the neural in nature, require implantation while the subject remains fully conscious. Ow, painful. Enduring the agony of surgery without the solace of painkillers. Some organs are cultured externally from the gene seed, while others are injected into the aspirant, relying on their body's own physiological processes to grow. These organs unleash and regulate the metabolic changes necessary to elevate a mortal to the status of a space marine. The gene seed carries with it the Emperor's encoded biological design, containing viral machines programmed to reconstruct the male human body according to the transhuman template. Yet, even in the days of the first founding, there is no standardized method to unlock its transformative potential. Each legion, and later each chapter, developed its own methods and rituals to forming new Astartes, shaped by necessity and the culture of their Primarchs. During the experimental era of the first founding, when the 20 Space Marine legions were created, countless techniques were tested to master these divine alchemy, transforming ordinary mortals into the Emperor's Angels of Death. These variability would become a hallmark of the Astartes, reflecting the uniqueness of each chapter's heritage and traditions. Now, is there any extra things that goes into making a Custodes, or is that just an even more pure gene seed than what the Astartes themselves are getting?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Custodes, they don't have gene seed. They are a way more mix of like there's science when it comes to making a space marine. There's like an actual scientific process that you can track. Where with the Custodes, there is a alchemical process that also happens, or like a magic based process that happens. So they don't have a second heart. They don't have all these gene seed implantations, which I'm going to read out in a second. But the
Mhm.
way they get stronger, like why custodes are so strong, is not because they have I forget which one makes them strong. But it's like an alchemical process. Their
Mhm.
muscles are alchemically infused.
Mhm.
Oh, interesting. Super cool. I always heard the um kind of the example of how a space marine is to just like your baseline human, a custodes is like that to your average Astartes.
Hmm.
They're just that much stronger.
Each individually handcrafted. Like sometimes you might hear the joke that they're like testy babies. Because they literally are. Like usually taken at infancy.
Yeah, as opposed to like around 10 or whatever. And the other
Mhm.
thing about the Space Marines is like they are mass produced, which seems weird when we say it when talking about the 40K setting. But you know, chapters are only 1,000 strong because of like legal reasons, as opposed to an actual like production output reason. They could make a lot more, they just legally can't.
Mhm.
Gotcha. Fuzz in the comments says custodes are handcrafted artisanal warriors.
They really are.
Yeah.
And I think, and you also got to mention too, like the cost of creating a custodian versus an Astartes. Like what Mark said, they're supposed to be mass produced. They're supposed to be affordable to
Mhm.
actually make. But when it comes to a custodes, I think like it's I think like the common saying is like their value is literally measured in planets, is how expensive it is to make just one of them. And I think
Oh wow.
a lore tuber made the joke one time. I think it's yeah, a lore tuber made the joke like Jeff Bezos would bankrupt himself 3 times over if he tried to make just one custodian. So
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other quick thing about the Astartes is, yeah, like very different roles between the Custodes and the Astartes. We talked about in this episode how the Astartes were originally the very front facing army. It wasn't the Imperial Guard or at that point the Imperial Army. It was the Astartes that were the backbone of the Emperor's might, where the Custodes are his personal bodyguard. You know, they're not supposed to be out there conquering planets. They're supposed to be on Terra making sure the Emperor and his his will is met. You know, if he has an important message to send, he'll send a custodes. They're equal in like diplomacy as they are in war. They're
mhm.
equal in stealth operations as they are in frontal assaults. They are the best at everything and can do everything.
Just gonna say, isn't part of their training like when they're becoming custodes is they have to try and infiltrate the imperial palace and try to assassinate the emperor? Is that like I thought I read something about that at one point?
That's a very fun tale in regards to hmm do we talk about this now or do we talk about it at a later episode? Because this involves like a lot of moving parts, and I don't want to spoil anything depending on what Mark has planned.
Yeah, maybe let's hold it, but yeah, they definitely do have that. Let's hold off
Yeah,
on it though.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah. We
yeah,
do have a
yeah.
Cool.
custode episodes, I think around 50, maybe roughly. So maybe if you can't wait till we kind of dive a little deeper into them, go back and check out them in that episode.
I call dibs on appearing on the Custodes episode.
No, you have to show me the model you want to hold dibs on. I have to see a fully painted mini before I like will hold a spot for you. I think that's how we're
well,
doing it.
well,
So
good because I have 6 that you can choose from with an entire with the Arc Champions Battle Force waiting to be built and painted. So,
Very nice.
um,
but before we move on, I did have a quote I want in regards to Custodes versus Astartes was I think it was one of the heresy books and it was talking about Constantine. I think it was Constantine Valdor. Somebody in the comments, feel free to correct me, but a Custodes had actually made the point of saying the Astartes are to the Emperor are like the wolves for the Emperor, and then the Custodes are built to be like lions, if you want to
mm,
think of it that way.
yeah,
Okay.
like a pack creature versus a solitary predator. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So jumping back to the gene seed, we'll just quickly go over some of what these gene seed enhancements, like what actually makes a space marine. Like, yeah, we know they're stronger, faster, tougher, smarter, which often isn't talked about a lot, but they are smarter. They're able to retain information way better than we can. But I'll read some of the gene seed here. They have a secondary heart. They have the osmadula, which is it just allows their bones to turn as hard as ceramite. They have the biscopia, which is able to increase their muscle growth. Sorry, I'm just kind of reading Lexicanum and summarizing it as I go. If I sound like I have a crazy stutter, which I normally do, but then they have the hemisterian, which is used to increase their circular system, regulate their blood and stuff, and also when their blood then touches oxygen, it releases this thing that instantly cauterizes their blood for them. They got the layman's organ, which is this is that blood cauterization kind of thing that releases the layman cell. They has the cataspian node, which allows them to go into like a coma-like state when they're mortally wounded. They have the preeminor, which is a second stomach that can digest all types of poisons or indigestible foods. You'll just be able to get all the nutrients out of it, no matter what. They have the omophagion, which is called the remembrancer thing, which allows them to eat people's brains and flesh and actually gain kind of some genetic memory from it. Like when we're talking about the Space Marines, they got some crazy things that are so often overlooked. Like this is one of them where we wonder, well, maybe we don't wonder, but a lot of chapters, they have all these blood rituals and like consuming of enemies' flesh and stuff. And like, how did that come about? Why are they doing that? How is that not chaos? But
or the ability to spit acid or eat really anything.
Yeah. But you kill the enemy, you eat their brain, and maybe you just learn the location of their leader through like these rough, hazy visions and like the scattered information. So very cool. They got the multi-lung, they got the oculobe, which is a better kind of eye. You know, they can see in different light spectrums, and they have the ability to zoom in and enhance. They got the layman's ear, which makes them immune to like dizziness and motion sickness. They got the sus-ed membrane, which keeps them from suffering mortal wounds. It just kind of makes them tougher, essentially. Then they got the melancholic organ, which allows them to darken their skin tone depending on the radiation from the sun. So it's a form of protection from suns. Because you just imagine you're going out into space and stuff, and like, yeah, you'd need some type of thing to kind of protect you from some of these extra radiation and stuff. They got the oolitic kidney, which is just a better kidney. The neuroglottis, which enhances their sense of taste and can identify chemicals through their taste, so they can actually break down what they're kind of eating and stuff. They got the mucinoid, which is a second skin, or it's like a substance that kind of they excrete over their skin that allows them to ignore hot and cold temperatures a little better. It allows them to create a vacuum seal on their skin, even in the vacuum of space.
Man, I wish I had that.
Are you in space often?
No, but to regulate my hot and cold a little bit better instead of sweat. Could you imagine if you could just ooze out this slime and then all of a sudden you're like this nice comfortable temperature?
They got the Belcher's gland, as stated. They can spit a type of acid. And they got the progeninoids, which are like the gene seed kind of genetic code that they implant, and then they can take out and implant to the next guy. It's kind of this overall template that they have. They got the black carapace, which is put underneath their skin. That is like a sheet of plastic that also kind of allows them to get plugged into their armor and stuff. And the final thing, that one's Blood Angel specifically. So yeah, they have all these different implants and gene seeds that really make them the Space Marine. It's not just that they're stronger. It's not just that their muscles are bigger. It's that they're underneath their skin is a layer of plastic metal to keep them that much stronger and tougher and hijack into or link directly into their power armor. You can shoot them with a small arms pistol, and chances are good it's not going to hurt them because it's going to bounce off the black carapace.
Yeah, I mean, everyone imagines that inside of your power armor, like it's big, bulky. How can they move very well in it? But no, it's almost like having a second set of skin on you with that black carapace. Like they can move just as well as a normal human can.
Yep. It's been said before numerous times, like with the reflexes that they get from these augmentations, it's a lot of people. It's always said like nothing that big should move that fast.
Yeah, it's like unnatural and eerie. You're like, whoa, like it puts you off. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But quick question from Grimaldus in the chat, and this is actually worth bringing up too. Is does the blood cauterizer not always work? So do we want to talk about how, like, sometimes these, depending on the legion too, these things don't. What am I trying to say here? I'm blanking.
Yeah, sometimes there's mutations that they have, or just over 10,000 years, or even at the creation, which we'll talk about, some of these gene seeds were messed up. Maybe during the initial process of taking it, they didn't have the ability to take enough at the time, and it just kind of got lost. So some of these, they don't have some of these abilities.
Mama said that the Space Marines are always so angry because of their Asmundula oblongata.
Jeez. Well, you don't often get a Forrest Gump reference, but when you do, it makes a boy happy.
Forrest Gump, it's Waterboy, but
oh god damn it!
Okay. Oh no!
Either way, I was thinking about some type of retard, I suppose.
Oh.
Yeah. So gene seed mutations. We'll get into some of the gene seed mutations that happened very early. Like these ones happened at the outset of the Great Crusade. Some happened later, like the Blood Angels. They got their gene seed defects when Sanguinius died. And others happened just slowly over 10,000 years of genetic replication. But yeah, we'll just read through them quickly. I won't read the Legion if they don't have a defect. So the first one we have is the Emperor's Children, and they have a high sensitivity to physical imperfections requiring near perfect genetic compatibility. So this is the other thing about Space Marines. When you're finding that 10-year-old supple boy to turn into a Space Marine, they not only have to be strong, they have to be fast, they have to be deadly, they have to be fearless, they have to be all these things you'd want from a soldier, but they also have to match the genetic template that would kind of line up with their Primarch. They have to have that same gene coding, essentially, those same, genetic markers, or, I'm not a space geneticist, so I don't know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about, but I imagine there's ways to break it down better than that.
Mm-hmm.
So the Emperor's Children, they had, a slight variation in this and it wouldn't work for them. The Space Wolves, they had the instability of the Canis Helix, leading to susceptibility of the Curse of the Wolfen. We'll get into some of these and why these happen. Why are there fucking werewolves running around? The next one are the Blood Angels, who later suffer from the Black Rage and the Red Thirst. We'll get into that eventually too.
Before we get another B team complaint, just to bring up that one from before, the Red Thirst had always been a thing. The Black Rage wasn't until after the Horus Heresy.
Yeah, I got those mixed up on that one episode, and I got flack for it, which was fun.
That was such a glorious letter to read, though.
Oh man. Nemo Forever says Mark didn't say that he isn't a ground geneticist, so yeah, this is true. I am spreading my seed across Panama as we speak, just doing genetics down here. On the ground. Okay, the Thousand Suns are highly susceptible to psychic mutation and instability. Then we got the Salamanders, a genetic mutation resulting in jet black skin and glowing red eyes. So, we talked about some of their gene seeds being affected. So they had that hot, cold gene seed, the mucinoid, I believe. Oh, no. No, not that one. Whatever. Theirs is messed up. The melancholic organ is messed up, so they can't control the tint of their skin when it comes to radiation. It's always just jet black.
Yep. And didn't it have something to do with their home world of Nocturne too, because it was like such a high radiation zone or something like that?
Yeah, and that gets always weird. Like, so were the Terranborns not black then? Like, when did this happen? The Primarchs kind of had it. Like, was Vulcan white and then he got flung onto Nocturne and then he turned black, or was he out black from the beginning? Hard to say. Why did the Emperor make just one black Primarch and one Asian white scar Can Primarch? Is he the master of diversity?
I'm just gonna bring up Khan. Yeah,
hard to say. Hard to say exactly how that all went down. Once again, I'm not a space geneticist. I'm just a ground geneticist.
especially if you look at artwork of the Emperor himself, who just looks like angry space Jesus. Like,
I like some of the older artwork of him where he looks like angry Native American space Jesus.
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of some of the early gene seed mutations and stuff. Yeah, so Space Marines are just so much more than just soldiers wearing armor, carrying the best guns and war gear, who just have been pumped up on steroids, and indoctrinated. They have all these different other little elements that just take them over the top.
mm-hmm. Especially like the intelligence too, because we like to think big, scary, muscular super soldier, bolt around, go burr, but you know,
Yeah, most
um,
of them are tactical geniuses in their own right,
mm-hmm,
like each individual person.
Yeah.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, like when
absolutely.
recruiting, they test for that for sure. You want a smart soldier. We did that cool Pure Tide, Commander Pure Tide in his students episode where we talked about him going on to the Mounted Tide and writing down his own Art of War Tower Edition, and how great military minds often, the reason why they win wars isn't because they had the best soldiers necessarily. It's because they had the best tactics or the best logistics or whatever that kind of outside of combat approach would have been.
And the thing too about one more thing about Gene Seed before we move on to the next part of tonight is Mark made a good point. It was like, one, you had to be compatible with the gene seed that you're getting, but then you also have to worry about how viable is it after the implantation process. So not only do you need to pass the genetic screening, you got to make sure your body can accept all of the everything from the gene seed during the implantation process. So that's why, in the case of the Emperor's children, their success rate was so low. In the case of the Space Wolves, their success rate is very low because of their instability, so on and so
Yeah.
forth. That's why certain legions have a whole lot more Space Marines than the others, because of that compatibility and then that viability after implantation.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So,
Yeah, I mean, there's such a huge ratio too to like how many people you can take that could be even an aspirant to become an Astartes. It's like every 10th, it's like 1 to every 10,000 humans or something like that.
Yeah, that's
mm-hmm.
roughly always a good number.
Now, as giddy as it makes me talking about the biology and the anatomy of all this, let's talk about the Great Crusade real quick. So, the Great Crusade was a defining epoch in the early history of the Imperium, a time of ambition, unity, and relentless expansion, spanning from approximately 798 M30 to the early decades of the 31st millennium. It was a period where the Emperor Mankind sought to reunite the fractured worlds of humanity under his rule, ending the age of division that had marked the age of strife. In the wake of devastation wrought by the 5,000 Terran years of chaos and technological regression, the Emperor led humanity's resurgence, a brief, fleeting moment of light before the darkness of stagnation and war would consume the galaxy. This era, known as the Golden Age of the Imperium, saw the Emperor walking among his people. His ambition clear: to unite humanity and pave the way for its ascension as ruler of the stars. The Emperor believed that such a destiny was necessary not only for the survival of humanity, but to combat the endless threats posed by chaos, the Xenos, and mankind's own frailties.
It's so funny that the golden age of the Imperium technically was like only 200 years in their 10,000-year history. Such a small little spark and a glimmer of hope. But even to call it like the golden age of the Imperium, all they did was just go from world to world killing Xenos. And they're like, it was the best of times. It was just the best of times.
It was an age of heroes and villains. Well, not exactly heroes, because they still blow up planets on a daily basis.
Yeah, I always thought it was funny how much the Emperor did not want to be called a god, but now in 40K, he's worshipped as a god.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't think he wanted that necessarily, but
When you really think about it, Lorgar had the last laugh. Just saying.
yeah. Yeah. More on that in episode 108.
To carry out his vision, the Emperor created the Space Marine Legions, genetically enhanced warriors who would serve as the vanguard of his crusade, and the Imperial Army, which would provide the necessary support for the Astartes. These legions, born from the Emperor's genetic mastery, were intended to bring the light of the Imperial truth to every world in the galaxy. But this very creation would sow the seeds of their downfall, as the accelerated process of gene seeding would give rise to flaws that would ultimately play a part in the betrayal that would come. With the with the assistance of the Mechanicum, bound by the Treaty of Mars, the Emperor's forces spread the influence of the Imperium across the galaxy. At its zenith in the early 31st millennium, the Great Crusade boasted 4,287 primary expedition fleets and over 60,000 secondary deployment groups, tasked with enforcing imperial compliance. The fleets, vast and far reaching, carried with them not only warriors but 4.3 million remembrancers, artists, and journalists tasked with immortalizing the triumphs of the Crusade in music, art, and the written word. Alongside them, the iterators, philosophers, and propagandists spread the imperial truth, seeking to convince every human world of the necessity of imperial rule. And I think that's important too, that it's not just 8 foot tall super soldiers that are coming in shooting bolt rounds at everybody. It's also like all these people and logistical support that you're going to need to actually prop up your empire after it's all said and done.
Yeah, I love that they included philosophers and propagandists because, history is written by the victors. So you got to make sure that you're sending good storytellers to write down each of these conquered worlds.
And I heard some people would say that, granted, I don't know how true this is, and this is probably just imperial propaganda, but like the emperor wasn't as strict about freedom of speech as he made it seem, as long as you basically held that, the state mandated atheism and all that stuff. Other than that, like, freedom of speech wasn't as, how should I say, suppressed as it would be 10,000 years later.
Yeah, like the 30K and 40K settings are very different. In 40K it's so steeped in regressionism and backwards ideology and religiosity and zealotry and all that stuff. Where that was not the case during 30K. Um, you know, the Emperor was coming to kind of reunite humanity more so than tell them how to live. And he was kind of just like, okay, well, just make sure if they're doing something, serving chaos or something, we got to wipe them out. But beyond that, like, we're just trying to reunite and try to bring humanity back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys: do you guys prefer 30K or 40K Imperium?
Whew.
It's a loaded question.
It is.
40K all day, man. I
Yeah,
love the
same.
backwards nature of it. That's like just so 40K. I love that before you turn on your computer, you gotta light a candle, say a prayer, and apply some sacred oils. I love that, and they don't know why they're doing it. They just know that helps.
Yeah, I've got my sacred oils next to me, and you see I lit some candles before hopping in with you guys. So
Yeah, and that's why we've had no stream drops this whole time, because you did the right rituals and stuff. Where if you did that in 30K, they might be looking at you like, is he going to summon a demon on us? What is he up to over there?
It only took me 1,387 attempts to put the oils on properly before I got it to go this time. I should have written it down.
Yeah. Don't worry. When we get more money on our Patreon, we can hire oil boys for us who can apply the sacred oils for us to our bodies. So,
yeah, I just want a little cherub flying around, just massaging it into my shoulders.
And next thing, you're just going to see me sitting in like a black bathtub, like a Baron Harkonnen from Dune. So, okay,
that's a fun visual for me to picture now of you, Gerald. Very nice, and I know what your real face looks like too underneath that mask, so it's very pleasant for me.
It is. Okay, I'm nope, not gonna go there. Not gonna go there. The Crusade's path seemed damn it. Oh man, the Crusade's path seemed yet unyielding, as the Emperor personally directed the campaigns, guiding his forces toward victory. The turning point came with the destruction of a vast orc during the Ordinal Crusade. During the Ordinal Crusade, a victory that marked the height of the Great Crusade's glory. Oh, there we go. Yet with this triumph, the emperor withdrew to Terra, his eyes turning toward a secret project that would change the course of the Imperium. The opening of the Eldari Webway, a labyrinthine gateway that would unite the stars in an unbreakable web of travel and protection, shielding humanity from the predations of the warp. In his absence, the emperor named his favorite son Horus, the Primarch of the Luna Wolves, as War Master. With this title, Horus was granted command over the Primarchs and their legions and full authority over the Crusade's direction. The Emperor also established the Council of Terra, laying the foundation for the Emperor's future governance and bureaucracy that would sustain it. With these actions, the Emperor entrusted his vision to those who served him, a move that would prove to be his greatest weakness. For in that moment of trust, a power relinquished, the siege of betrayal were sown. The tensions between the Primarchs, exacerbated by the Emperor's growing secrecy, left gaps in his leadership that the ruinous powers would soon exploit. 9 of the Primarchs, corrupted by chaos, would turn against the Imperium, leading their legions in rebellion. Thus began the Horus Heresy, the civil war that shattered the Great Crusade and ended the golden age of the Imperium. From that moment onward, the Imperium would know nothing but stagnation, oppression, and endless warfare. The echoes of the heresy reverberating across 10,000 years of broken dreams.
Home sweet home in 40K.
Yeah, we're finally here, full circle.
It's all downhill from here, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Man, I think it's funny. The Emperor made the best decision ever by making Horus the War Master.
Yeah, Jack says his most trusted and loyal of people. Yeah. So much kind of happened in that little Great Crusade segment where they're advancing across the galaxy and they're conquering world after world, and they're doing a heck of a job. And near the end of actually reuniting all of humanity under one banner, the Emperor decides to go back home and start up the next phase of his plan. The Emperor has different steps to how he's trying to plan humanity and bring it to the next level of enlightenment. And the next step was the Webway project, which would allow the Imperium to forego using warp travel, forgo using any of that kind of stuff. Like, because his ultimate goal was to separate humanity from the warp. He's seen the warp as like the great enemy at the time, and even today, and it clearly showed that he was right. That is the great downfall of man, this kind of chaos nature. So yeah, this was his kind of big plan once he reunited humanity. Now that we're reunited, let's make it so we can travel and communicate without having to deal with demons.
Yeah, and for anyone not familiar with the Webway project and the Webway itself, go back and check out that episode. It's a great way to kind of find out more. Very informative.
I like
Yeah,
how
fun
Fuzz points out
episode.
in the comments, Horus Heresy is just a bad parenting advice story. Lol.
Yeah. Too bad it has galaxy-shattering consequences.
If only we can all be so lucky when raising our children. Only half of them fell? That's a pretty good ratio in my mind.
Not too bad. So if I have 2 kids, does that mean one of them will love me and one won't?
Yeah, one will definitely try to kill you if you've done it right.
My daughter is a little genius. I think it's going to probably end up being her.
Oh, God. Look out behind you. She's in the room.
Beware the smart ones.
So I'm going to touch a little bit. You had mentioned about the Horus Heresy, so let's touch a little bit on that. The Horus Heresy, known in the annals of time as the Age of Darkness, marked the beginning of the Imperium as it is known today. Originally called the Great Heresy War, it was a cataclysmic civil war that ravaged the stars for 9 Terran years, ending the Emperor's Great Crusade and shattering his dreams of a unified humanity under a single banner. The heresy consequences were far-reaching, and its dark legacy still casts a shadow over the Imperium's every breath. It begins with the corruption of Emperor's most beloved son, Horus Sleepercall, the Imperial War Master and Primarch of the Sons of Horus Legion. The Chaos Gods, ever watchful, twisted Horus's ambition and feeling of betrayal, seducing him into rebellion. With cold cunning and brutal resolve, Horus turned against his father. rallying half of the Primarchs and Space Marine legions to his side. Together, they betrayed the Emperor and sought to claim the Imperium for his own dark purpose. The war raged across the galaxy, engulfing countless worlds into the flames, as traitor and loyalist forces clashed in a conflict of unimaginable scale. The hearts of men who were torn asunder, and even the Imperium's greatest defenders fell to the ruinous powers. For 7 years, Horus led his forces towards Terra, the throne world, with a singular goal: to break the Emperor and claim the galaxy in his place. The final cataclysmic confrontation took place on the sacred soil of Terra itself, where Horus, through victorious in battle, was slain by his father. The Emperor, grievously wounded, was cast into the Golden Throne, a broken husk of his former glory. His dream of a bright future for mankind destroyed forever. The heresy itself took a staggering toll. Over 2.3 trillion souls were lost in its wake. 4.6 trillion were counting the countless worlds purged by the Imperium to rid themselves of the taint of chaos. Yet the consequences of the heresy did not end with the fall of Horus. With the traitorous legions exiled in the Eye of Terror and the Emperor's physical form entombed within the Golden Throne, the Imperium was irrevocably changed. In the aftermath, the shattered remains of the Space Marine legions were reorganized into chapters, a process known as the Second Founding, which forever altered the structure of the Adeptus Astartes. Reboot Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines, rose as Lord Commander and Regent during the time of rebirth, guiding the Imperium into the 31st millennium. His actions helped to rebuild and reorganize the shattered Imperium, yet the scars of the heresy lingered. For the citizens of the Imperium in the 41st millennium, the Horus heresy is little more than a myth. Time has eroded the truth, turning into a collection of distorted legends filtered through the lens of imperial dogma, the Emperor, now a god, and the realities of the heresy are obscured by the deification of the Emperor, the Inquisition's revisions of history, and the theological needs of the Adeptus Ministorum. The full and terrifying truth of the heresy, of the Emperor's fall, and the galaxy's destruction remains hidden, buried under a web of lies and half-truths. I mean, 10,000 years is an unfathomable amount of time. I mean, think about to the year zero and how little we know from back then, or even our own medieval ages,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I often think about how much more we know than the common imperial citizen knows. Like, does the common imperial citizen, are they able to name all 20 Primarchs? Maybe the loyalists, maybe, but probably not. And definitely when it comes to the traitors, they really probably could not name them. For even to whisper their names would be like, whoa, dude, you should not be saying that. Like Voldemort. Don't say it.
Mm-hmm. There was there was one book where an inquisitor makes it into the imperial palace, and he makes it to like a restricted section that was kept away from the common folks, and they actually got to see like the statues and the plinths of all the Primarchs, and then they're just like thinking, wait a second, there's only 9 Primarchs. Who are these other guys? And then what are these 2 empty plinths doing here? So like
Yeah.
them as an inquisitor doesn't even know about all 20 Primarchs. So if that tells you anything.
And then inquisitorial bolter around cleared his memory.
Cleared. Oh God. But yeah, no, that's kind of I was talking about the approach to writing these episodes. Like, I think that really kind of sums up how I want to approach them. Like, there are key details that the highest up people would know, but so much of it has been lost to time. And like, we wouldn't know all these minor details and all these intricacies and all these hidden strings that connect everything. It just would not exist in 40K.
Mm-hmm.
So the Horus Heresy, pretty fun time. Brother versus brother, they turn on their father and kill their father, semi-kill their father, and ruin his glorious legacy, and ultimately cast humanity into this downward spiral that they cannot ever escape from.
I like how it only took 7 years to take 2 centuries of galactic expansion and just throw it all in the blender. Just 7
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, yeah. Not that long.
Shows how good Horus was at War Master, if he becomes your enemy, and how quickly he took back all the Imperium's gains.
Yeah, and it seems like every time you read it, it's like roughly half of the Imperium fell. Like, he was able to convince like half of it. It's not like he had some ragtag group of guerrilla warfare fighters that snuck onto Terra and killed the
Mhm.
Emperor. Like, it was every planet felt the chaos of this incident, you know. Fully half of the Imperium fell. Fuzz asked, "What's a Primarch?" Yeah, no, like, honestly, would they know? Like, we talk about when an Astartes like lands on a planet and the Imperial Guard Regiment there sees an Astartes, they're like, I've heard of the Angels of Death. I never thought I'd be lucky enough to see them. That either means I'm incredibly lucky or we're fucked. This planet's fucked. One of the two is about to happen. Either we're saved or this planet's just in a next level of danger.
Mhm.
Now think to 40K, and if you happen to see Gilliman or the Lion show up, you might as well just, we're done. We're done here. Well, we ain't gonna survive the next 10 minutes. So
So I've got a question for you guys. Do you think the Chaos Gods would have been more powerful during the Horus Heresy when half of humanity was kind of in their grasp, or during the 40K setting?
Oh wow, great
Hmm.
question. Yeah, like, hard to say with the warp for sure, for sure. I don't know if I have a good
Mhm.
answer for you, but yeah, I would imagine that they probably would have been more powerful back then. Um,
Yeah, just sitting back, feasting on all the souls that the Traitor Marines are sending their way.
yeah, and even like, the
Mhm.
Great Crusade and stuff, like 200 years of war, what does that do to Korn? Does that amp him up? He doesn't care where the blood flows and where the skulls come
No.
from. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
that's a very interesting thought. And they were powerful enough back then to like cloud the Emperor's foresight and make it so like all these pieces were moving where they don't seem like they have as much of a like direct pull in the galaxy in 40K, where they were directly whispering into the ears of some of these Primarchs and stuff and getting them to directly turn. Um, Hard to say though.
Yeah, or souping up Horus enough to be on the Emperor's level to take him on.
Sure. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Hmm.
Now, are we taking into account the Cicatrix Maledictum? Because I'd say that definitely has a huge part in how strong Chaos has
Mhm.
gotten in 40K.
Yeah, I forgot
So,
about that thing. Oh yeah.
yep.
Oh man. There
Pretty big. Pretty
there
big.
are so few things I consider canon past 8th edition, but that is fucking one of them, man. That's the coolest thing, just the rend in the
Mhm.
entire galaxy. So after the Horus Heresy, fully half the Imperium falls. The Emperor gets defeated, but ultimately wins a horrific victory. And then they enter the Great Scouring era where the Astartes go and try to purge the galaxy of all the traitors and stuff. Um, and eventually we get to the Second Founding. The Second Founding only occurred 7 years after the Horus Heresy. In 021 M31, marked a pivotal moment in the history of the Adeptus Astartes. It was in this grim epoch that the surviving Space Marine legions were divided into chapters, creating a new tier of warriors. The chapters formed in the wake of the vision were forged from the very same battle-hardened Astartes who had stood beside their Primarchs through the devastation of the heresy. Each second founding chapter was initially formed from the gene seed of their parent legions as the progenitors. However, with the aid of the Adeptus Mechanicus, this gene seed was isolated and new genetic lines were formed. The Astartes of these chapters, born from the first legions that served the Emperor, earned the title Successor Chapters. This was a distinction not granted to later foundings, which were designated to maintain the ever growing number of Astartes chapters within the imperial boundaries. So now we got second cousins, and eventually you get third cousins and fourth cousins and stuff. But that's neither here nor there. In certain cases, the formation of a chapter was influenced by the disposition of its battle brothers. For instance, the Imperial Fifth Legion, torn asunder after the heresy, birthed two renowned chapters, the Black Templars and the Crimson Fist. Zealous warriors flocked to the Black Templars, while others, more inclined to adhere to Reboot Gilliman's Codex Astartes, formed the Crimson Fist. And there was a third chapter at that time too, the Soul Drinkers, but they kind of had their own dark fate that little expunging going on there too. After these years passed, the original legionnaires faded into legend. The second founding chapters forged their own histories, their traditions, distinct from their progenitors, became their own, yet their roots remained sacred. Even thousands of Terran years later, the second founding chapter. These chapters are held in high esteem, often considered second only to the first chapters in honor and respect. While no formal hierarchy exists, many second founding chapters retain deep ties to their progenitors, particularly among the successors of the Ultramarines, known as the primogenitor chapters. They look to the Ultramarine chapter master, Marinius Calgar, as a symbol of unity and leadership, often joining in his wars. Yet even within the venerated bond, there have been clashes, chapters striking alone, carving their own legacies, and reasons both noble and obscure. The Dark Angels, while they're broken down into chapters, they all still answer to their chapter master of the Dark Angels. Some of them have very close ties to their first founding legion.
I like how they kind of they skirt the line of the Codex Astartes of like, you can't have any more than 1,000 Marines. Wait a second, what are you doing, Dark Angels? You seem really, really close to your successor chapters. No, we're just
No,
just chatting, just saying hello to our cousins and shit.
they got a different color scheme. They're different.
They're totally not Dark Angels.
The Ultramarines, being the largest of the original legions, sired the greatest numbers of successor chapters. Some other legions, such as the Space Wolves, could not be divided as extensively, giving rise to only the ill-fated Wolf Brothers. The full scope of the second founding, however, remains shrouded in mystery. The details are lost to the ages, with only fragments surviving in the pages of the Codex Astartes, including the Apocrypha of Scaros. This ancient tome claims that the 23 progenitor chapters were birthed from the Ultramarines, yet many names remain absent. This is a cool little tie-in that you can, I don't ever like people writing like for sure stuff where I am for sure a second founding chapter, but you could be like, we claim to be, and it's 10,000 years, as we mentioned, is a long time for things to kind of get lost and muddled. So you could still kind of insert your guys there from the Horus Heresy maybe and after, and kind of start from that point.
And because the Imperium is such great record keepers,
Yeah.
you can fudge some numbers just a little bit, people.
Yeah. Some chapters, such as the Raptors and the Silver Skulls, may have been formed during this period, though their exact origins remain unclear. The Salamanders, for example, are never definitively listed in the Codex, though their successors are believed to have been born of the second founding. Among the more enigmatic creations of the time is the Grey Knights, a secretive and elite chapter that serve as a chamber militant of the Ordo Malleus. Their gene seed is thought to have been derived from the Emperor himself, remains a matter of whispered legend, never to be confirmed, although honestly, I wrote that little bit in there because I don't think they should have been confirmed, which they are, but I don't want people yelling at me. They are confirmed to have the Emperor's gene seed, but what the fuck does that even mean, Grey Knights? What is that? Does the Emperor have gene seed? What are we talking about here? Hard to say.
Well, I mean, if he created the Primarchs from something from his gene stock, so there has to be something that the Emperor could provide to them for them to provide to the Astartes. So they had to have received something.
Yeah.
I don't know. Gene seed would be the correct word for it, but
the Emperor's love. The passage of time has obscured much of the truth of the second founding. Some chapters, lost to history, have faded into obscurity, their deeds and fates known only to the Emperor. Others, though glorious in their past, have not been heard from in centuries. Some believing themselves to be second founding chapters, yet their origins remain uncertain. The annals of the Imperium are fractured, their records scattered and incomplete. The full truth of the second founding may never fully be revealed, leaving only myths and legends in their wake.
Nemo Forever in the chat says, Primarchs are artificial. The Emperor was not lab type artificial.
Yeah. And then he follows that up. The Emperor shouldn't have gene seed. I agree. I think that's one of those things where it was a cool concept that somebody just took too far. Like it's one of those details where it's better left unknown, man. A lot of these details are better left unknown, lost to the fragments of time.
Yeah. I feel like that's kind of the danger of like, if you're wanting to homebrew your own Space Marine chapter, well, now all of a sudden they have all these rules and background lore information where it's like you're kind of writing yourself into a corner now. So it's and it's how do I put this? It's fascinating, but also not at the same time, because it's great that you get to know so much about how Space Marines work, but now you got to be careful about what you write for your own homebrew stuff. Otherwise, you're breaking the lore, and then that's not good either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, that was kind of the end of our notes there. Before we get some caller ins, maybe let's just quickly talk. What is your guys' favorite Legion? And we'll do Loyalist and Traitor. Which chapter in Legion and Primarch are you most excited to discuss in the coming future?
I think so. Blood Angels are definitely one of my favorites, but I'm slowly working my way into Dark Angels as well. Sanguinius being dead, but then Lionel Johnson being alive. I'm kind of starting to like the Dark Angels a little bit more. And honestly, I don't know a whole lot about them. I'm still kind of doing my reading up on them, so I'm excited to learn a little bit more about them.
Yeah,
I
cool.
really like their minis too, how a lot of them have like the swords and the shields rather than like the bolters and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they just got that knightly vibe going on for sure. Love it.
Hmm.
Yep. For me, for traders, I would definitely say Luna Wolves, and only Luna Wolves, not Sons of Horus, Luna Wolves.
Ah.
But as far as loyalist legions, I'd probably say the Salamanders, and then followed very closely by, I apologize, Rayway, Space Wolves. There, I said it.
That's a bannable offense.
Uh-oh. Well, it's been nice knowing you, Discord.
Yeah, for me, probably let's go. I'm a pretty boring person when it comes to Space Marines. I like the stock Imperial Fist or Ultramarines. I've always just been like, man, they're cool. All these legions are cool, but I would rather just build my own, just like I always build my own homebrew lore for every army that I do.
Hmm.
These give you cool examples and give you cool directions on what things could look like, but ultimately, I don't care about what other people wrote. I want to write my own shit. So there's my special snowflake answer for you boys. Take it or leave it.
Jax Carnage says, I love how Nick says he loves Blood Angels than Dark Angels, knowing damn well he answered the traitor question as well.
That's funny. Speaking of Jax, we'll get Primaris Jax to the stage here. Hey, welcome to the show.
Yo, how's it going, everybody?
Hey, what's going on, man?
So we'll throw the first easiest question at you. What's your favorite legion?
Traitor and loyalist, or just in general?
Yeah, traitor and loyalist.
Gotta love the Night Lords. They're the coolest traitor legion. And for loyalists, I'd say it's between Dark Angels and Raven Guard.
What do you like about what speaks to you about them?
Dark Angels just got the best drip in all of 40k. Just throw a medieval robe over some armor and then
Oh, it's so cool.
I really like the Raven Guard theme. And then Night Lords are always just the best in general, so
So let's throw you a little deeper question here. Do you think that the Emperor planned this all to happen? Do you think the Emperor had a grand plan of allowing the Horus heresy to happen? This allowed him to become a god himself. Do you think his kind of goal was always godhood? Or was this just one big accident for him?
I like it more believing he planned out most of it. Like he planned going to godhood, but he didn't plan on how all that happened. He didn't plan on being in a stasis situation on the golden throne. But it's more reasonable to think
Less than ideal.
yeah, it's more reasonable to think he goes to Moloch and is like, okay, you make me 20 kids and you just scatter them across the galaxy into these places. Don't worry about it, Chaos Gods.
Don't even worry about it. Yeah. Do you think the Emperor could have done anything to avoid the heresy, or like if he was a little more better of a father, what could have been done? Maybe should he have let people in on the terrors of the warp and the realities of the warp? What do you think?
Funny story, but he actually did with a few Primarchs. Like, he let Corvus Corax know about the warp, like the first Primarch in general to know about it was Corvus, because the Emperor did tell him, and resulting from that, Corvus was one of the most loyal Primarchs. But yeah, if he just like told all of humanity, you would have had Horus Heresy 2.0. Less Primarchs betraying you, but still. Yeah, just like sitting your son down, patting him on the shoulder, and telling him it's gonna be all right, Angron. While Angron's, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
just being a better dad.
Yeah, maybe he should have sent Angron to a paradise world. Like, listen, you got a bad hand in your upbringing. We're not gonna send this rage monster into battle. Just go to this paradise world. Just chill, have some martinis or whatever you want. Just chill, Angron.
Try and find some way to get the nails out of his head.
Yeah, just go spend some time at Paradise Reef with Panama and Mark down there. Just chill, man.
Go to Comrade, get some of that very, very chill space weed, and just chill him out, dude.
He walks out to the water at your place, Mark, and he just starts punching it.
No. Why can't I kill it?
He gets in a fight with your pet crotolid.
No,
Just throwing hands
not
up.
my alligator. Not my alligator.
I can't remember which. There's a Caesar during Roman times that actually sent soldiers out to fight Poseidon, and they formed up on the beach and was like throwing spears into the water.
Yeah, that'll happen. That's some regressive religiosity there. I like it. Cool. Well, Jax, thanks for calling. And do you get any closing thoughts about this episode?
Always love Space Marines, especially Primaris. I'm not just joking. Please don't ban me. Subscribe to the Patreon if you haven't already, and enjoy maybe getting a call-in or any of the perks, especially the flashy green title in Discord. You can flaunt around, but
yeah, for
other than
sure.
that,
Yeah, I've seen a couple new people I haven't seen in the chat today, which is always exciting to see new people. You know, we have a lot more Patreon members than we kind of do the call-in show. I know not everyone is able to watch at specific times and stuff, but yeah, still always fun.
there's no excuse for missing a Lorehammer episode.
No, there is not. The Emperor will not forgive or forget that. All right, up next, we're going to call Nemo Forever to the stage, and after that, we're going to call Fuzz, since I don't think we've ever really talked a whole lot, where Grimaldus and Purge, we've had you guys on a little bit, so calling up Nemo Forever to the stage. Hey, welcome.
Hey lads, mic check.
Yep,
Yeah, we
coming
can
in.
hear you just fine.
New mic, so I'd ask.
Oh,
Ooh,
nice. Getting ready for our Sunday episode that we're doing together, eh?
Well, yeah, it's my Christmas gift to me to kind of splurge on a mic a little bit. And
Nice.
and just to be nice to the podcast too, you know?
Yeah. So we'll ask you the easy question, get you warmed up. What's your favorite Legion or Primarch, Loyalist or Traitor?
Ferrus Manus, Iron Hands for both Loyalist and Traitor.
Notice
Okay.
no hesitation in that answer. Zero
Yeah.
hesitation.
Yeah.
I'm kind of salty, my good tech priest, that you already have the mask going, because if I do it too, I'm just a copycat. I can't just be a tech priest and be original about it. Just a little salty.
I'm telling you, buy a can of green spray paint and spray paint your faint screen and go the orc route.
I wonder if I can even get the little accent going there well.
Cardboard cutout of a Necron face.
Oh yes, lots of great options here.
Mhm.
So what do you like about Ferrus Manus and the Iron Hands?
The political nonsense of an entire Astartes legion and then later chapters, and just the successive chapters. Like, no, not successive. What's the word I'm looking for? Like the different
Scanning.
foundings after the
Yeah.
legions. That there are Astartes are ultimately imperial property, and now you have a whole whack of them that have such close ties to the Mechanicum. The political insanity that comes out of that is actually kind of nuts, because when the Imperium and the Mechanicus, or Mechanicum back then, when they originally got together, it was kind of nuts how much imperial property they made off with, but only at the beginning. And then after the fact, they're just kind of continuously nomming down on knowledge and intellectual property belonging to the Imperium that goes outside that treaty. So then, when you now have a post Great Crusade compliance happening to a world that isn't obeying, and it happens to be a Forge world, and now you got Astartes on one side, and you have some Iron Hands related Astartes on the other side facing down, that gets interesting real quick.
Yeah, like the Imperium or the Mechanicum never really came up with their own super soldier program. Like, yeah, they turned everyone into cyborgs, but clearly they're no match for it. When Astartes pull up anywhere in the galaxy against any foe, everyone starts shaking in their boots. And for the Mechanicum, this second empire, they are their own unique empire to have this kind of access to them as well. Yeah, very interesting for sure.
The Mechanicus does kind of have some Astartes comparable assets, but nothing with gene seed, nothing with this. This isn't just Imperial property. This is the Emperor's stuff that they're just nabbing and making off with.
Yeah. Yeah, and nothing as like mass produced or like as what's like a line where everything's kind of like a baseline. Like, yeah, they might come up with these cool crazy cyborgs that are better than Astartes, but like they're one-off creations almost, or that they're time intensive or resource intensive, where the Astartes are just these mass produced, easy to make kind of things.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, and for those special things that you're mentioning, what you have then is you're not just having serialized production of something that's really nuts. It also gets tied to the individual Forge world. Because, like, for example, you got Ryza and their plasma. No one does plasma quite like Ryza. So, where you have this Astartes where you can pretty much take, if you have the basic components to any world and make an Astartes, you won't have two Forge worlds ever really do things quite the same. So now you have this reality plus an entire legion of Astartes that they go and they become tech priests individually, which is kind of
Yeah.
insane when you also consider the ban on religion.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's just so many things that they are now allowed to do differently, and opens up this whole new world of possibilities.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing to consider too is like for a fully compliant chapter per the Codex Astartes, you have to have several tech priests seconded from a Forge world or where have you to actually help make their equipment function to aid in the implantation process of the apothecaries. So the Mechanicus or the Mechanicum back then were fairly integral in making a lot of that happen with the Astartes legions.
Yeah.
So I've got a question. So humanity's seen as the rightful rulers of the galaxy. And the Adeptus Mechanicus, while they are human, they're augmented so much that they're borderline almost not. Let's say humanity ends up winning the war and, they now control the entire galaxy. Do you think the Imperium humanity side would allow the Adeptus Mechanicus to remain?
Yeah.
If I could take a stab at it.
Yeah, please do.
I'd say that for the same reason why they couldn't just ignore the Martians when the Great Crusade started, they couldn't just ignore Mars. They also they couldn't really get the Crusade going at the same scale as they could have with compared to without. And then there's the fact that at this point, the Mechanicus is integrated so deeply into the Imperium that in 40K, they're an Adeptus. They are an Imperial branch now. They lost a
Right.
great deal of independence just by being slowly, seamlessly, well, not seamlessly, but definitely meshed in. Like,
Yeah.
you could try, but how many Imperial citizens are going to be like, but they're the Emperor's tech priests in the same way that the Emperor's Angels of Death, the Emperor's Sororitas, because it might have started as one thing, but I really got to wonder what they've become.
Yeah, like I would imagine if this did come to blows, this would be a bigger conflict than the Horus Heresy. Like, you got these
Oh, yeah.
Forge worlds that are supplying not just weapons, but like toasters and cutlery and whatever else. Everything that is made by like mechanicum hand. So all of a sudden you start taking that away from imperial citizens. They're like, well, are we going to really be imperial citizens and start to live in poverty, or do we want to join the mechanicum? Like, it would just be a crazy conflict.
And I guess it's not just that. Like, there's the Titanicus elements. There's the armored elements. There's the Imperial Navy. There's the black ships. How are you going to sustain the black ships without the Mechanicus?
Yeah, I mean, all valid points, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I'd say no, but it'd be funny to see them try.
Cool. Any closing thoughts there before we hop to the next person, Fuzz?
Oh, no. I'm just glad I got to give this microphone a bit of a spin.
Yeah, I'm hyped for our episode on Sunday. We're doing the High Lords of Terra. Yeah, we're going through them, and yo, man, I've written lots of notes before, and I've sent notes to lots of people. And you must have been the craziest editor of all time. I sent you the notes, and within 20 minutes, the whole fucking document was like, "Here's all your typos, Mark."
I am mostly sorry.
No, it was good, man. It was good. I mean, I'm super hyped to do an episode with you. It's going to be a good time.
Otherwise, your notes offended the Omnissiah.
That's fair. That is fair. Yeah, I can't read very well, but fuck, I can copy and paste some notes.
I'll get out of the studio and let someone else waffle on for a bit. You guys have a good one.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for
You as
calling
well.
in, Nemo. All right, and I think our last call-in of the night is going to be Fuzz. Hey, welcome to the show.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Perfect,
Hello,
man.
hello.
Hey, good to hear and see you.
Nice to see you guys.
So the standard question, what Legion and Primarch do you like? Who's your daddy?
So for me, Big Daddy Rogel Dorn was the first one that really drew my attention. I've always been like a big fan of medieval history and medieval warfare and things like that. So the Imperial Fist being that sort of like expert siegecraft legion, or I guess, well, one of two, the good one, the better siegecraft legion, really drew me to them. Just like the stoic soldiers standing in defense of Terra during the Horus Heresy, and all that just really spoke to me. Also, black and yellow is my favorite color combination too.
Black, yellow, and tossing white helmets, man. Fucking tight.
Oh, it's super
so
cool.
good.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on it very briefly, that they draw from, like, they're loyalists to Terra, and they draw their recruits from Terra still to this day. Like, that's a unique aspect of them.
Yeah, it was also like, kind of like Nick was saying, I've started looking into Dark Angels more too, and they are also seem pretty cool for, again, like that similar medieval vibe, but like on the opposite side of it. They are those, kind of reading it to me also like almost more so than the Ultramarines, like your ideal Astartes, just in the front line with your sword and your shield and your bolter at your side, just an unstoppable march forward of a shield wall and power swords, just ready to stomp you into the dirt.
Yeah. I definitely like 30k Dark Angels a lot more than 40k Dark Angels, without revealing too much, again, too down the rabbit hole. But, they have a big shift after the Horus Heresy, where all of a sudden they like to go hunting for things, as opposed to this kind of knightly crusader type vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then for a Traitor Legion, the Death Guard, like that. The aesthetic is just so, I find it much more interesting than any of the other ones.
Stomach mouths, what can you say, man?
Yeah, just like, I don't know, it's just so
yeah.
unique.
Yep.
And I don't know, the idea of, again, like, I guess maybe again back to like all of like that medieval fandom of mine, just like the plague going around and just spreading something, and even kind of contrary to, or like a good foil to like Rogel Dorn, and that defensiveness is, how do you stop a plague from floating through your city walls?
Good fucking luck. You put on a cloth mask, I've been told, and apparently you're immune to such viruses. Just one small piece of fabric over your mouth, and you're good to go.
You got to wet it in pee first to act as like a natural barrier.
Oh yeah, that keeps the dust out.
I don't like that at all. You got a cute little daughter there. Don't want to show her face too much
Here,
on
let's get you down.
channel. Yeah, sorry.
Let's get you down. It's all
Don't
right.
want the perverts on YouTube to see her.
That's fair. She also likes to
Yeah.
sit downstairs and paint with me.
Yeah. I fucking can't wait till my daughter's that age, man. That just makes me excited seeing a kid sit on your lap like that.
Right.
I'm fucking hyped.
It's great to have them get into the things that you enjoy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Nick, you have some kids too, and you were telling me your daughter likes to do like model airplanes and stuff, and that's so 40K
she does.
adjacent.
That's very cool.
And spare sprues of like Imperial Guard that I have that I've got no use for. I'll give her a little bit of paint and she'll paint them up. And I've actually got some up on my shelf here.
Nice. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
classic. Have you showed your kids Dad Hammer, perhaps?
Not yet, but I need to.
Yeah. Okay.
They're busy with their own
I always-
activities.
Yeah. That's fair. Okay, well, back to the founding of a legion. What else kind of spoke to you about this kind of episode or topic?
One thing that actually kind of I was thinking about more and more was like, what does the average Imperial citizen know? And I think actually they might know more than we give them credit for, thanks to the ecclesiarchy, because very much similar to like how, you would go to church in like the Middle Ages through the Renaissance and things that's like, especially when people couldn't read, much like your average citizen in 40K probably can't read much more than like, a first grade level of low Gothic or something. They're going to church and having all of this spoken to them. And with the cult of the Imperium, the cult of the Emperor, the Astartes are angels, and so the Primarchs would be, the heads of those, let's just say choirs of angels or whatever you want to compare it to. So they might at least know that Primarchs exist and maybe know if the world that they're on has, let's say, a patron Primarch of it would know them.
Yeah.
But I feel like they would at least have a general understanding of there are Astartes and then there are like those who stand above the Astartes but under the Emperor.
Yeah, just kind of going to that like analogy of church and whatever, and angels, and like I grew up very religious, but I couldn't name many archangels. I could name the archangel Michael and Gabriel, and maybe if I really scratch my brain. But beyond that, like we know that they exist. Yeah. So, the Imperium citizen would definitely know a lot of this like religious indoctrination, but like, man, I'm just scratching my head. Could I name 9 archangels? No. Just like the Imperium would struggle eventually. They got the concept of it, but beyond that concept, a lot of the truths and secret is kind of, just that secrets.
Yeah. I mean, very Old Testament when angels were warriors.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Fun. Okay, closing thoughts there, Fuzz, or?
I love how like each legion has its own bit of flavor, and that you can take that and work with it to create your own unique legions like you like to do, Mark.
Yeah, man. That's always been my favorite part about 40K. It's just they create this sandbox for you to come play in, write your own stories. There's very few rules. You can get away with a lot of different things and just have fun with it.
Yep. Cool. Also, everyone, like it was said before, subscribe to the Patreon. Come hang out, talk with all of us on Discord and on here on live chat. It's a great time.
Yeah. We have over 3,000 members on our Discord, and it's growing every day. So, and same with the Patreon. So, thanks everyone for supporting the show in that way. It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, Fuzz.
All right, y'all have a good night.
See you on the next one. Adios. All right. Wow, what an episode. So, I think with these 2 episodes, the Primarch Project and the founding of a legion, we got 5 hours of context now, because the next episode is going to be Lion L. Johnson and the Dark Angels coming up. And man, just going through the notes, I highly recommend reading Descent of Angels. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I fucking love that book, man. It wasn't very 40K, but fuck, it was good.
I'm looking forward to learning more, and I certainly learned a lot from our show today that I didn't know before getting into it.
Yeah, there's always another little rock in 40K to look under and be like, what's under here? Oh god, there's a Space Marine Legion under here.
Yeah, you can know a lot about little parts of it, but to know like a lot about everything, very difficult.
Yeah, to be honest, man, like just approaching these episodes, it's daunting, man, to write notes and stuff. Like it's a daunting topic, and there's just so much, and what is actually relevant, what is not. But I think we got a good approach, and I'm excited to do it. So gonna be a fun year coming up.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think we'll get to the end notes here. You know, go listen to Lorehammer, Listen to Lore. It's a fun little podcast for those people who like writing their own homebrews, and I'll read it off and share it. And man, I am always surprised with the quality of what people write. Oftentimes I thought I would get just like troll posts or just the shittiest of lore, but honestly, a lot of people are just fantastic authors. So go check out Lorehammer, Listen to Lore podcast.
And whenever you're done listening about sci-fi with a heavy dose of fantasy, come on over to the Grimlore podcast, where I host with Rayway, and we talk about Warhammer Fantasy, which is being brought back as the old world. And you can come join our Patreon, because as long as you're a patron, you stand the chance of becoming a guest on our show. So there's that little fun perk.
That's a nice perk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mark is one of our most esteemed patrons, and his list of titles grows with every single episode. And
we got some type of money laundering scheme going between me and you, Gerald. It's like you subscribe to my Patreon, I subscribe to your Patreon. We're just transferring $4 back and forth each month.
Pretty much. And but yeah, so join the Grimlore podcast if you want to hear more about fantasy stuff. We also talk about other settings too, depending on what Ray and I are in the mood for. And we actually just had a bonus episode where one of our patrons shared one of his own homebrew settings, and that was a lot of fun. So
cool.
That's awesome. And then if anyone wants to chat 40K with me, you can follow me on Instagram at Black Fox Miniatures. I throw up some of my painted works on there. But really, anyone that wants to chat with me, come join.
Yeah, man. It's always just so fun just talking to random people. And there are so many people in this life that I know absolutely nothing about them as a person, but I'm like, oh yeah, this guy likes this chapter. He doesn't like these guys. Oh yeah, this is what he thinks about this 40K topic. I don't know what his last name is. I don't know what Nick and Gerald's last name is, but fucking love talking 40K with you guys.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's the biggest part of the Discord, is the community on there and being able to chat with everyone about it and seeing all the chats that they have with each other.
Yeah,
very, very rewarding.
Yeah, man. Cool. Well, we have 4 new Patreon members since yesterday's recording. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Like, our Patreon is growing significantly. I have been updating our Patreon slowly. And the one thing I did recently was I created a separate RSS feed. So normally if you want to listen to the ad-free version, you had to like listen to it on Patreon, but I just set up an RSS feed so you can now listen to the ad-free version on Spotify through Patreon. So that was kind of a cool little update that I did. But thank you so much to Dylan, Brendan, Nick, and Scrake for joining the Patreon. Every dollar just helps us keep doing this. And yeah, we're just going to keep growing the show and keep after it. So thanks so much. Well, any closing thoughts for tonight, boys?
Gotta decompress my brain about all the things I learned about the Adeptus Astartes and their Primarchs.
Yeah, you need to go into an Astartes hypnomat and really get that washing up the brain. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I need to get off of my giddy juice, because I've been so giddy to talk about Space Marines and some Custodes tonight. So I'm gonna go back into my sacred oil bath.
Well, gross. You enjoy that. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. We'll see you all in the next episode of Lorehammer. Adios.